Good afternoon, members, and welcome to this afternoon's sitting of the Education Committee. So, housekeeping. First of all, I would advise members that the committee meeting will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online, and I would advise those in the public gallery that they're welcome to use mobile devices as long as they are in airplane mode and that all devices are muted. And I would remind everyone that it's not permitted to take photographs or record any part of the meeting. Item 1 is apologies. So I don't have any apologies, but would just note that we have both Cara and Michelle joining online today. So for either of the members joining online, if they could just obviously through the clerk and the team advise if there are any issues with audio or your connection. Possibility John may be joining online, but not confirmed at this stage. Item 2 on the agenda is chairperson's business. I don't have any chairperson's business today, so that moves us on to item 3 in the agenda, and that is declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest they wish to make about any item on the agenda today? No. Again, if something should arise, if you could just flag that. I'm just going to note there is a piece of correspondence which I may speak to as it relates to the SEN regulations later in the pack from Angel Eyes NI, and I would just declare that my wife is an employee of that organisation. Okay.
Yes, my wife's a governor at Mitchell House special school, so I guess. Okay, yeah, that can be noted. Okay, item 4 on the agenda is matters arising. So I would refer members to the reply that we have at page 3 of tabled papers from the Department to the Committee for Justice regarding the Special Educational Needs and Disability Tribunal Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2026. So happy to hear members' views, but I think maybe this is one for the clerk to speak to, but I think the proposal here would be that we would be looking to finalise our position on this for next week's committee meeting. Have I understood that correctly?
On the justice, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so we have asked just for some more information. Consultees had particular questions of the EA, and officials have advised that they will reply to those. So we'll have that in next week's packet.
Okay, so if members are content that'll be deferred to next week.
Yeah, just a wee small point, just considering what we're talking about today as well around the SEN regs and the amount of conceding that the EA end up doing when it gets to tribunals. I don't know if we can, but I would like to hear some evidence again from the experts on this. I'm actually quite nervous around some of the SLs now, and I'd like a wee bit more evidence really before we would give any recommendation.
I think it is clear, and I think last week's evidence session is clear that there is likely to be a need for substantially more evidence around some of the regulations being proposed. I think around the tribunals that is possibly one we can pick up today in today's evidence session when the EA are in, and if there's an action arising that or nothing further around tribunals and the amount of concessions there are, then we can certainly follow that up if you're content with that, Danny.
I certainly won't be taking their word for it though.
Okay. Also in matters arising, I would refer members to the correspondence received on the committee office list of correspondence received to date on SEN summer schemes. So I'll just invite the clerk to speak to that paper in the first instance.
Sorry, Chair, I don't have that open.
Oh, you're okay.
Are you looking at that?
Yeah.
In the brief itself.
So it was in the brief, but that's not a problem. Look, I'm happy to speak to it very briefly. I think for me the main issue, what committee were looking for when we were seeking that breakdown of the correspondence received on the summer schemes. Certainly I had been interested in what the live safety issues were that were not nursing related. We've had correspondence from the health department setting out that this wasn't really an issue about nursing, and that feels a bit at odds then to the material we've had from the EA. So I would suggest I think there is still an issue in relation to what live safety issues are still under consideration. We understand nursing provision is in place, but in terms of those summer schemes being delivered this summer and how they are being addressed. And I would also be keen to know what level of engagement is actually ongoing between the principals of the special schools around the running of those schemes. So I would like to propose we get some correspondence away to the department on that issue, and I would like some assurances that they have something in writing from the EA that these can be delivered safely. because if it's not nursing, I'd like to know what it is. Kathy?
Yeah, Chair, I agree completely with you, and also just think add to that around the support that the EA are given to the schools, and the principals who are delivering these schemes. I've heard quite worrying details from certain principals around the threat that theirs won't go ahead. Just down to basically a lack of support in the EA pushing it towards them without giving them the resources and the support they need, and in actual fact one being threatened again if theirs being pulled. So I would like to agree with that, but just add to it about the level of support that the schools are receiving to deliver these.
I think that is really important. I think any special school principal you speak to highlights that this sense of operating in a grey area. It's an EA scheme, but it's their premises, and who's liable, who's responsible, where does the buck stop. And I think while we understand the principle is it's EA, I'm not sure it feels like that on the ground. So I think those are all really relevant things to seek clarity on if we're all agreed.
Can I just come in on that? Because this is relevant, and it's a response to a written question that I got asking the Minister to detail any areas of work currently being progressed through the Joint Health and Education Oversight Group. And in 2.5 years they've only had eight meetings, and there are only 2 areas where there's focusing on the oversight of the work. One is to develop a new model of care for children with complex medical needs in special schools, and it says the group has also discussed the provision of nursing support for the 2026 summer scheme. So in 2.5 years, that's the sum total. I mean, that's absolutely disgraceful, and we keep hearing talk about the need for health and education to be working together, and we saw the debate in the chamber the other day around another issue, and again a lack of cooperation and collaboration between ministers, and the people who suffer at the end of the day are the most vulnerable in our society, children with special needs. So I mean,
thank you for
that on the record.
Yeah, no, I think again important to do so. I think so much of the evidence we heard in the inquiry, and even what is now emerging out of the SEN regulations, it feels like it can't be delivered without health being at the table, fully engaged, and taking all of their responsibilities seriously. So I mean, I do think that is concerning. May well be something to consider in terms of our SEN inquiry report, in terms of whether recommendations around that oversight group and in terms of how effective it is, maybe something that we should take forward.
Okay, so there's been quite a few to and fro's, and it's helpful to have that differentiation for the new letter going out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone content with that? Yeah.
So just one other issue that arose in the media this morning, and that's the department statement around integrated education and the alleged lack of demand for integrated education. And it seems to me that the DUP are just trying to downplay the demand for integrated education. We know, and I know this from having listened to whistleblowers and people on the inside of the education system who believe that integrated education is encroaching on the controlled sector and diluting the ethos, whatever that ethos might be, within the controlled sector. And so the hostility and animosity towards the integrated sector is ideologically based on the part of the DUP, who see this encroachment as a dilution of a Protestant stroke British ethos in the controlled sector. And you know, the department and the minister are actually manipulating the figures in a way to suit their own ideological position, and I think it's absolutely disgraceful, and I just want to put that on the record.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. I'll bring David in and then I'll maybe respond as well.
I mean, it's quite a tirade, but it's just absolute nonsense. I mean, I would be interested to hear from where, although very conveniently, Pat's not revealing his sources of who has said what around this, but where he has heard this tirade from our quarter or against integrated education, I have always acknowledged many of our integrated schools are good schools. I have those that serve my constituency do a very good job. Our only contention is that one sector should not be raised above another in terms of our discussions around that. And that sets aside from the issue today, which is the departmental report and the data that's held within. But where on earth we're getting this idea that there's some DUP agenda again. I mean, it's constantly talked about that we're against integrated education, but we're against the Integrated Education Act, and that was about raising one sector above another. There was never at any point us saying that we're against integrated education. We just think that there are a number of sectors and they all should be treated equally.
Well, that's fair enough. Through the chair, of course.
That includes that's
fair enough. You're opposed to the Integrated Education Act. Doesn't matter whether you're opposed to it or not. There's a legal, a statutory obligation within that act to encourage, facilitate and support integrated education. And this minister is not doing that. And just as you're saying you're not hostile to the integrated sector, you keep saying you're not hostile to the Irish language either, and everybody knows that's absolute nonsense.
I've met a number of times with the integrated sector.
David, I don't care how many times I've met with them.
Deputy Chair, allow David to write a reply, and then I'll maybe sum up on this item.
Yeah, I mean, I've met with them a number of times. I would be interested to hear if any of those who I met felt that I was hostile to them in any way. I mean, it's just throwing out rhetoric and slinging mud around without any sort of factual basis. I mean, we haven't said anything. The one row or discussion we had in this committee around integrated education was largely to do with one or two particular schools in terms of Bangor, and that was down to the fact that there was only 3% from the minority community within those schools. So, I mean, we can have different opinions on that, and I know that there are different opinions around the table, but it was in pretty factual basis. It was not certainly some ideological war against integrated schools, and there's no evidence of that, Pat, whatsoever.
Draw that to conclusion. I think maybe just to move it beyond maybe a spat between the Deputy Chair and David, I would perhaps like to suggest a response to what the Deputy Chair has highlighted. I've put comments on the record today in the media, so don't feel the need to rehearse those at this stage. But I do think, given that the report is an outworking of the Integrated Education Act, it is a statutory duty of the Department, and also as we have moves around an independent area planning commission, we have discussions now emerging in more detail from the Department around jointly managed community schools. I think it would be timely to seek a briefing from the Department on that demand report and on the wider work within the system around trying to deliver a more sustainable and a school estate where there is more facility for children to be educated together. I don't think that's going to be feasible this side of summer recess, but I would like to suggest that it would be an opportune time to receive a briefing on those issues after the summer, if members are agreed.
Yeah, point of information. Just, Jared, my understanding is that the Department, hostile as it is putting out a call today to encourage schools where it makes sense, particularly in rural areas where schools are isolated, as you've talked to many times, to call for integration. So, I mean, the idea that the Minister's hostile is just ridiculous. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Well, I think to hear from the Department and possibly from other stakeholders, IAF and IC would be appropriate, but I don't think this side of summer would be feasible, but I think we'd be looking at a briefing after recess. Okay, I think we're agreed on that. That takes us to item 5, which is draft minutes. I'd refer members to the draft minutes of the Education Committee meeting of the 13th of May, and that's at page 36 of your packs. I'm just going to seek members' agreement that those are a complete and accurate record of proceedings. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, item 6 then on the agenda. So it is an oral briefing from the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, if the witnesses want to come forward. It is a briefing on the SL1, Special Educational Needs SEN regulations, although I think potentially witnesses may want to provide a general briefing on some other issues, but I would just draw members' attention to the number of briefings we have on our agenda today, so it would be helpful both from witnesses' perspective. I think if possible, and I know you're all representing different organisations and different members may have different emphases, but where possible, if one member of the panel could cover each of the themes, maybe from a member, just to try and help us to keep to time, and for members as well to try and keep your questions succinct when it's your opportunity to ask. But all that said, I would draw members' attention to the briefing note from the committee clerk at page 47, and just extend a welcome then. Joining us today we have Marie O'Shea, Chair of the Education Trade Union Group with the Irish National Teachers Organisation, Samantha Bronze, the Education Trade Union Group representative from Unison. We have Sally Rees, the Education Trade Union Group representative from NASUIT, and we have Jeanette Murdoch, Education Trade Union representative from NIPSA. So you're all very welcome today, and if I've got anybody's job titles incorrect, feel free to correct me. It has been known. So I'll hand over to you at this stage for any opening remarks you want to make. I would ask that be up to 10 minutes, and then we will move to question and answer, and we're going to try and be fairly tight to 5 minutes per inquiry for each member. Okay.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. Just to reiterate, we are part of the Education Trade Union Group, which is an umbrella group within ICTU that represents teaching unions and support staff unions collectively. So it's a unique committee for us to be able to come in a united voice here in regards to matters in education, and in particular today on the implementation of the special needs regulations and the wider work of SEN provision in Northern Ireland. Myself and Jeanette are going to speak to the piece on SEN, and then we've got Sally coming in with some stuff in relation to the ending violence against women and girls, and for Samantha to come in on some stuff on the universal free school meals piece as well. So we'll start with the SEN stuff and then we'll work around that. So we would say across the unions that there's broadly support for the principles of inclusion and strengthening the rights of children with SEN, but argue that the implementation has not been matched by adequate funding, staffing, workforce planning or specialist support. In particular, we raise matters in relation to the SEN duties having expanded without adequate resourcing. Teacher and support staff unions consistently have reported that the statutory SEN obligations have increased significantly, while school funding and staffing levels have failed to keep pace. In particular, we recognise that schools are now supporting increasing numbers of children with complex needs, higher levels of behaviour and emotional need, and growing demand for specialist interventions. Concerns have been raised that in the future outworkings of the SEN regulations, that schools are going to be expected to deliver an enhanced SEN provision without that sufficient SEN funding, without adequate classroom assistant numbers, without timely access to specialist service and appropriate staffing ratios. Teachers' unions in particular report an excessive SEN related paperwork as part of the growing workforce pressures, increased administrative burdens, pressure on SEN coordinators and increased classroom management pressures linked to unsupported need. We would also look to the part on lack of specialist support and training. Both teachers and support staff unions report insufficient access to education psychologists, autism specialists, speech and language therapists, behaviour support services and specialist SEN training. And our unions would argue that the mainstream schools are increasingly expected to manage highly complex needs without the multidisciplinary support required for safe and effective inclusion. In relation to the delays in assessment and school placements, we would say that the implementation of the SEN regulations would put increasing pressure on schools to manage the practical outworkings of this support and to be the primary accounting agent for this, which abdicates a high level of responsibility from the Education Authority. The enhanced support model further adds to this piece of work around essential standards. Schools and staff involved in the practical outworkings of this provision allocation are unsure of the mechanisms to be used here and how EA and schools will work collaboratively on this. And we wonder, will the challenge around the provision be based on these standards be challenged in schools or in the EA? Because there's too much jeopardy in the system for us at this moment in time. Under health, safety and wellbeing concerns, we raise our concerns that the mechanisms for reporting incidents related to behaviour and trauma-related behaviours and violent outbursts or assaults on staff are not being recorded robustly enough, and no data for teachers is currently held in the system. And teacher unions in particular would call for the work on the TNC regarding preventing violence in the workplace to be progressed as a matter of urgency. overall, we would say that the successful implementation of SEN regulations requires sustained investment, stable staffing structures, workforce training, proper recognition of classroom assistants, improved access to specialist services, and realistic workload expectations for all school staff. The central concern expressed by both teacher and support staff unions is that the SEN system is increasingly dependent on overstretched school staff attempting to compensate for wider systematic underinvestment and capacity shortages. And I'll hand over to my colleague Jeanette to make some points in regards to support staff.
Okay. Just in relation to the SEN transformation then, obviously we're in agreement with everything that has been said, but for support staff it's around the local impact teams, and there's a fear from staff there that they've been moved from having specialist skills moved into a more jack of all trade, and that they're being sort of stretched further, but then the specialism has been lost with that. Also then in SPIMS classes, the special provision in mainstream schools, classroom assistants there aren't being paid the same rate as their counterparts in what would have traditionally been called SLD, MLD schools, yet they're dealing with the same types of behaviours, complex behaviours, etc. And they should be on a J3, and at the moment they're few and far between, and that they should be on that job description. Going forward then, the enhanced support model, there's concerns around the time frame. The consultation ends shortly, but from June to September all of the work is meant to be progressed while staff and board headquarters are on leave and schools are closed, so it's not given faith in the system. Now they've had consultation meetings, and in those meetings staff and non-support or support staff have been very vocal in how they feel it's a case of putting the cart before the horse really, and that the expectations, and while they would agree that better training etc would be clear pathways, training, specialist roles with the appropriate remuneration, new job descriptions may all be well and good, but there's no budget, and there's EA are in a deficit. So how is all of that going to go forward if there's no budget to see all of these changes happening? So there's again, support staff are very concerned on the way forward. The plans in September, I know it's a 3-year plan and it's not all going to be all singing on dancing in September, but even at that, EA are reporting 150 schools that they're going to go forward with who are doing stuff outside the norm at the moment. Now, the trouble with that is EA have said, the trade union side, that they're thinking outside the box, and while some of the thinking is good, there's other thinking that isn't so good. So we're worried about the staff where they're being asked to work out their job descriptions at the moment without even this being brought in. So again, these concerns have been raised. So really, the trade union side, support staff are not happy. We're concerned about the haste, the unrealistic timelines. We're concerned about the schools holding the budget for SEN accountability and EA's oversight going forward. We're concerned about the grand plans with no detail on how they're going to be implemented or funded. We're concerned that the provision for statemented children will be diluted as the budget is spread over those children who could use support but do not have a statement. And we're concerned about the terms and conditions of our members and the potential for them to be asked to work outside their job description.
And if I could just finish on a point, for all our members in all our unions, this moment is significant, because it allows us an opportunity to demonstrate the power of collective voice, not only within the profession, but alongside advocacy groups who are working for the protection and upholding of children's rights. For the wider public, it underscores a simple but vital point, that effective education reform cannot happen without listening to those who are actually at the chalk face doing the job. As discussions on SEN reform continue, the members of ETUG remain committed to working collaboratively to ensure that any changes lead to genuine improvements for the outcomes of children. The unions will continue to advocate strongly for an education system that is inclusive, properly resourced and capable of meeting the diverse needs of all learners. So thank you, Do you want to go with the
that's
free school
no
meal stuff? Yeah.
Our free school meal campaign, specifically through Unison, began back in 2020. And it calls for the universal, nutritious free school meals for all. What we're asking for is it will look to challenge poverty, improve health and development, and hopefully increase the uptake in nutrition, which ultimately with pupils, it increases concentration, improves behaviour and educational outcomes, which is a must. We do want the best for our children. I'm going to just quickly look at what's happening in different parts of the UK and Ireland. In the south, every primary school pupil is now eligible for free hot meal in school. England, universal free school meals are currently provided to all children in reception year 1 and year 2. Scotland, their approach is more universal, with all primary school children from P1 to P5 receiving free school meals, as well as any child who goes to special school. Additionally, any child who is eligible for funding in the early learning childcare places can get a free meal on the days that they go, either breakfast, lunch or dinner. In Wales, all pupils in primary school can now access free school meals. And whilst the specifics, while specifics differ, what all these efforts show is a shared recognition of the importance of ensuring children have access to nutritious meals daily. But Northern Ireland now stands out as a clear outlier that we don't have this provision universally. The Welsh Government have recently published their first evaluation report of their universal free school meals rollout, and they have found that, quote, the policy has eased financial pressures on families, particularly those with multiple children, by removing the need to budget for school meals and packed lunches. The policy is also reported to have eased financial pressures, particularly for families just above the means test threshold, while reducing stigma and promoting a more inclusive school environment, which contributes to a fair and more supportive school experience for learners and their families. And the Institute for Social and Economic Research at the University of Essex has published research into the impacts of the free school meals that evaluated impacts in 4 local authorities and the schemes in London where free school meals had been available to children up to the age of 11. And it showed an increased uptake amongst almost those already eligible under the means testing, reducing obesity prevalence and helped households with the cost of living and improved reading test scores. So I think those findings are quite high. There was a consultation which closed in February, and we did put feedback into that, and we're aware that there was really good response from that, but there are budget constraints, and there's budget constraints everywhere. But we really want to be pushing to try and get this on the agenda, that we can get our universal nutritious free school meals for all pupils on the ground and on the go, whether that's through a phased approach or universally. That's where we're at with our free school meals. Thank you.
Okay, hello. So you may be familiar with the website Everyone's Invited. It's an anonymous platform where people submit, young people and teachers can submit their experience of being sexually assaulted in schools and colleges. In 2025, this included over 50 primary schools in Northern Ireland, and the post-primary figures from 2022 are standing at over 100, and that's across all sectors. A recent survey by the NSUWT in school of over 5,000 teachers exposed that 1 in 4 teachers are subjected to misogyny in the classroom, and as we know, 75% of our workforce is female. And this evidence is really borne out in what we're being told by what the experiences are of our women teachers in Northern Ireland. There's increasing levels of sexual abuse, verbal abuse on a daily basis, not doing what she tells me to do, but will do what a male teacher says. There's sexually graphic language being used, and also rage baiting to try and provoke a reaction from female teachers. We've had physically intimidation of female teachers by surrounding them, blocking their way, and asserting dominance over those staff. We've had several cases of sexually explicit messages being sent to teachers on Google Classrooms or over social media platforms, telling the female teachers exactly what they want to do to them, when and where. And then obviously we have seen a massive rise in image-based abuse and TikTok accounts using AI-generated deep fakes. And in one case that was using a teacher's wedding photograph. Girls in our schools are facing similar abuse, with cyber flashing from the age of 11, pressure to send nudes, victim blaming and shaming of girls and objectification of their bodies, and AI-generated pornographic images being circulated. This violates those young people, those women and girls in our schools. It's degrading, but it also creates a sense of fear and paranoia and a complete breach of trust for everybody in that school environment. And when these incidents happen, the common response in schools is the order of protection is reversed. What happens is we see that the needs of the pupil or the offender is placed above the needs of the victim. The common response in schools and colleges is to protect the perpetrator or offending pupil's rights to an education, and is driven by a fear of victimising the offending pupils over the rights of the women and girls to feel safe and protected in their working and school environment. Teachers are expected to just get on with it and to teach the pupil, and their competency is questioned. One teacher was told, maybe this isn't the profession for you. Girls who have been victims of sexual assaults by a pupil are then expected to remain in the same class with the person who's abused them, leading to long-term absence and illness and mental health issues. This is not trauma-informed practice. It compounds the trauma and harm of the original offence and shows a deep-rooted lack of empathy and understanding of the impact of harmful sexual behaviours. What message is it sending to the offending people about how they can treat women and girls? What message does that send to the rest of the school community on how they can be expected to be treated? Too often, risk and management plans are focused on the risk of the pupil re-offending and not the risk or the emotional well-being and safety of the person who has been the victim of that abuse. We're also concerned about the use of restorative practice being used in these situations, and would like to continue to engage with the EA on the production of guidance around when it should and should not be used. It is clear that women and girls are at risk in our schools, which is why we believe misogyny and sexism that leads to sexual harassment and assault needs to be treated as a health and safety issue. It is clear that schools are struggling to know how to deal with these incidents, particularly with the rise of technology-assisted abuse. And I think making schools a phone-free environment would be a good place, and we look forward to seeing how the Minister's pilot would be rolled out and the results of that. The End Violence Against Women and Girls strategy clearly states in their delivery plan in 26-28 to deliver a partnership with DE and an agreed Ending Violence Against Women and Girls action plan to coordinate interventions and training for teachers and young people focused on healthy relationships. So part of that plan needs to be a systemic approach. Firstly, we have to get mandatory RSE, consent-focused education delivered in our schools, and we need to make sure that that also debunks harmful gender stereotypes and includes critical digital literacy, so that the use and abuse of online platforms and social media is something that we're educating our young people about. We would advocate for a whole school approach as presented by the UK Feministas. So that already exists, and they've done a very successful pilot project in the UK, and we would like to see that roll out here in Northern Ireland. And that means establishing an institutional framework that is led from the top, that we train and equip all school and college staff, not just our teachers, in knowledge and resources and confidence to tackle sexism and sexual harassment, and that we support our students to learn about sexism and sexual harassment, and that we have a reporting and supporting mechanism that supports everybody, so that we are looking at a protective, preventative piece of work across the whole school environment. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks to all the witnesses for your evidence there. So I'll make a start. So just a couple of things at the outset. We have a full committee here. We're already behind on time, so it will be 5 minutes per member. So please, no protests if I bring your inquiry to a close. It's up to members how you use your time. So I just want to be clear on that. Look, there's so many issues covered there. I won't be able to go into detail on all of them. So I'm just going to pick up on the SEN aspect to start with, and just a really sort of open-ended one at this stage. On the regs themselves, is there anything at all, are there any specific regs that you are concerned about, that you think you'd have concerns on, or would your concerns be on the broader picture of the wider picture of SEN reform?
There are a couple of elements that we would have concerns about, in particular the designation of the Learning Support Coordinator and that role and how it's going to change and the implications school side, and in particular the expectation moving forward that there is significant experience and qualification in that role. And if you were to do a survey at this moment in time of all the SENCOs in post, I think it would be a very low level of those that have an additional qualification. And I suppose I would caveat that too with the fact that, you know, we respect the experience of all those SENCOs in the schools, and it's the experience that allows them to do their job as well as they are doing at the minute, but the system is working against them. And again, with any statutory role, it brings huge responsibility, and we would want to ensure that that was matched with the actual working space for those. We have long fought for non-teaching SENCOs, and if this is going to become that, it's going to move it a step further to us needing that school side if there's going to be greater expectation on them. And I suppose we have big concerns as well, and we've messaged it across both of our presentations, the work and the connections with the allied health professionals. That's key to what happens here, and if those connections are not there, and if significant groundwork isn't put in to get those people trained in those posts relevant to an education environment, then we're creating a system of an expectation where the resource is just not there to match it, and that's not fair on children or families or the schools that are trying to manage all of that. So there will be two key bits. But the wider piece and how the regs fit into all of this is everything seems to be mismatched. There's operational things happening in EA and things expected of schools, and have been over a number of years, that were put in place with the expectation of the regs being in place, and they haven't been, and there has never been any scrutiny on whether they're actually relevant to what we're trying to do in all of this. And it just seems to be continuing to move at pace, and that's concerning.
I think that issue of the sequencing of the legislative piece and the operational piece is something we can raise with EA, and on the health side. I think it's clear to me everything we've heard through the SEN inquiry, but I think it's really come through clearly when we've been looking at the regs. It absolutely requires the connections with health to be right, and I don't think anyone around the table in this room has confidence that relationship is right at the moment. And look, I'm not doing that to sort of impugn the reputation of anybody working in the health sphere. It's resource driven. It is just a challenge of the system being spread too thin. I'll ask one other question, if I could direct it to Jeanette at this stage, around classroom assistants. You highlighted some of the workforce challenges there around the qualifications not matching in terms of the workforce who are in providing support in specialist settings and specialist schools often, and there being issues around pay scales not reflecting the nature of the duties and job descriptions not being accurate. EA are clear they're wanting to undertake work in that space to do a wholesale review of job descriptions, job evaluations, what appropriate pay points are. Can you give the committee an insight into what level of engagement you've had from the EA around that piece, specifically around where classroom assistants and how their job role, terms and conditions, all of that fits into the picture?
Well, within the enhanced support model, it sort of indicates career pathways, etc. But there's no meat on the bones. There's no detail. Mm-hmm. It's a statement that's made, but when we're in meetings and asking what detail has been done now, the response back from EA is it wouldn't be appropriate to have detail before the end of the consultation. But if you're expecting something to start in September, you would like to think that you would have, a clear guidance of how you would like it to roll out, etc. There has been absolutely no work done on new job descriptions, and as a matter of fact, even within the job descriptions that currently sit there, there's a term time agreement in 2001 which isn't being implemented by EA on staff being made permanent after 4 years. So there's no confidence from our members, staff in schools, that it's going to get any better because they're not getting that detail.
I'll just note a concern at that point, because EA would communicate that work is live and there's active engagement with the classroom assistant workforce and the trade unions around that whole piece about the job role, job description, terms and conditions. I think if we don't get that right, we can't deliver SEN reform, because the classroom assistant workforce is crucial. So I think that's something we may well pick up from there. But I'll leave it there in the interest of time. I'll bring in the Deputy Chair at this stage.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for coming in today. And just picking up on that last question that Nick was asking, when the SPIMs were being set up, it was on the basis that there weren't enough places in special schools. Excuse me, I have a tickle in my throat. And so many of the kids who are in these SPIMs are there because there aren't enough places for them. So, yet classroom assistants are on a different pay scale from classroom assistants in the special schools. Is that fair, or can it be sustained, or do you see it being sustainable in the longer term?
That is the problem. That's why they're struggling to get staff in as classroom assistants, and even some of the situations. I mean, we were told about, instead of having classroom assistants, there was a youth person employed, who dealt with the parents filling in forms, etc. Well, that's needed, and the reason they were given the permission to do that was because they couldn't get classroom assistants in and employed, so they were able to use the budget elsewhere. But it all comes down to the amount of hours, the unpredictability of the work, and this drop-off when children go to P7. That classroom assistant, if they're a one-to-one, they're in a redundancy situation. So there's all of the terms and conditions and the way classroom assistants have been treated for, honestly, too many years. I was classroom assistant in a special school many years ago and worked for many years, and really nothing has changed. Even though we had the new job descriptions, a lot of people work outside their job description. And when you're in the classroom, and I'm sure my colleagues will concur with me, everybody, it's just hands-on, and you'd be hard pushed to see, in some cases, who's the teacher and who's the classroom assistant, or in fact who's the general assistant, who's on the lowest pay, is very much doing the same job as the classroom assistant. So there's all of those reasons that they're not getting classroom assistants, and why they're in a situation now where they're bringing people in from outside the school gates to be someone in the classroom. Now those people have now gained experience, etc. But we need to get back to where there's the qualifications and it's seen in that professional role.
And Danny and I were at an event recently in the Beach Lawns Hotel, organised by Unison, around classroom assistants, and I mean, it's absolutely disgraceful the way classroom assistants are treated, and the system actually depends on them. And if there isn't sustainability built into the system, it's going to face collapse at some time in the future. Now, I'll leave it there on that. Just on the SEN regulations. Sorry, Samantha, did you want to come in?
A wee bit to your question there, Pat. Are those classroom assistants that are paid special needs in the SPIMS class fair? No, that it's not fair, because a lot of those pupils, may there be spaces in the local special school, those classroom assistants will be on the additional rate of pay. And we are in a SPIMS working with the same complex needs of those pupils, whether it's medical, communication or sensory. But I think it's worth drawing attention that the teaching staff in those SPIM classes are awarded additional points from the interview process. They don't have to go through a similar process that we do with classroom assistants to try and push for the higher rate of pay. So no, it's not fair, Pat, that the assistants in SPIMs are not on the equivalent job role. Okay,
thanks for that. Just in terms of the SEN regs, you may have heard the Children's Law Centre in here last week, and I know that the union's saying that the letter and the statement that they released recently too, they have asked that the process should be stalled to allow for greater scrutiny. Are the unions in agreement with that?
I would say, broadly speaking, yes. From our interaction with the Children's Law Centre ourselves and with our contact with our membership, the pace at which it's coming at schools and the complexity of what this is, alongside Transform Ed and the curriculum review and our own workload issues that exist in the system as well. There are principals who are telling us, I don't have time to read what this is about. to understand what it's going to be like for my school. And I was at an event, one of the consultation events at home in Fermanagh, and I was walking out with a principal who said to me, I'm as wise now as when I went in earlier on. I thought this was going to give me a bit of clarity. There's even more questions in my head now. And she said, I know there's 20 emails sitting in my inbox that I have to read on it as well. And so the change can't happen effectively if people haven't got time to take a breath and reflect on what's happening. And alongside that, these 150 schools that are in this proposed pilot model, there's no outworkings of what's good, bad or indifferent in any of that to feed into what it's going to mean and whether the regulations are hitting the right mark with all of this. There's been so much change since they were written originally, and what we face now in the real world of the classrooms and the settings that schools are operating under. So I would have concerns about that, and the unions would be asking, yes, if there was a mechanism to pause things and take a breath, it should be taken. Get things right now. Don't be trying to undo it down the road, because that's practically impossible to do.
And you mentioned workload. Just one final question, Chair. The department has announced in relation to SEN workload £10 million funding for AI. Is that going to make any difference to the workload within your schools?
Well, the workload,
response on this one.
They'll have to learn how to use it first before they can see whether it's any benefit to them to work on their workload, and that in itself is a workload issue. And that's, the reality.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. Michelle had indicated.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, all good.
Okay, thanks very much. A couple of I want to focus actually just on the comments around the assaults for teachers and young people in schools as well. I want to raise that because I have a couple of cases myself on that. So the first thing I think just really to say is that one of the young women who was impacted in school actually came to me with the objective of guidance. She felt very strongly that experience, she had sympathy for her school actually, that they were just doing what they thought was right. They were taking advice around GDPR, protection of rights, balancing her rights to school with the perpetrator's rights to be at school, and ultimately just felt the process didn't work for anybody. So first thing to say is if you are progressing anything around guidance in this, very happy to collaborate, and actually had a meeting last week with EA on this myself and raised this, and we're due to have a follow-up. So just to say on behalf of me and that young woman, I think would be really keen to collaborate with you on that to make some progress. I guess I just wanted to get your thoughts then in terms of the context around this and that balance of rights. That young girl he came to the school because he had a right to education and she had to continue to go to school alongside him, but that impacted her right to education because she felt too intimidated and traumatized to go to school as a result of that. So have you given any thought to how we might reconcile that through some guidance? Have you had any discussions with the department or the EA on that?
I think the EA have their Equality Action Plan, which they're looking at, and that's going to be part of what they are going to deal with, I think, within that. I think the issue is there is no clear guidance because there is a lack of understanding of the impact it has on the person who's the victim survivor. And in that case, you're talking about a pupil. And what tends to happen is that young person is then treated as if they have to then move to a different class. They are then the ones that feel like they've done something wrong. And so I think it comes back to that trauma-informed approach and actually having those conversations with the victim survivor, whoever that is, whether it's a female teacher or a girl in the school, and saying, what do you need? How can we support you? And yes, it is a very fine balance because you have to support the perpetrator or the offending pupil's right to an education. But as I said in my initial evidence, I mean, what message are you sending to that young person if they've then returned to the school? They then see that they're in the same classroom environment as the person they've harmed. That kind of minimises and normalises that behaviour. And so I think it has to be that joined up approach between sanction and consequence, along with education and protecting the person who's actually the victim in this case. Whereas, she's now the ones refusing to go to school. Same thing happens when it's a female member of staff. They're the ones then that are left feeling they can't go into work, and then there's all of the rumour and speculation that goes around that. So we then have that victim blaming piece as well. So in terms of the bigger picture, if we're thinking systemically, it's how we actually look at that as a system-wide level, and that actually all schools should be saying, right, we know that sexism and sexual harassment is a big issue. We need to actually be having a deep dive and looking at that, and actually not being afraid to admit that there is a problem there, because we know that. The NSUWT have just commissioned joint research with UK Feminista, so I'm sure you're aware that they have done research in the past, which is often cited. We're due to publish that. We're just starting that journey now. So we will have a real firm basis of evidence, and that's across all 4 nations. So I think that will be really impactful piece of work that we do. But I would urge you to look at the UK Feministas whole school approach, because it does set out a clear institutional framework, how it can be done. All the resources are there. We know we're stretched for time, money and resources, so we don't need to be reinventing the wheel. But I think when we talk about a trauma-informed approach, we actually need to be making that properly victim-centred. It's not working for either the female teachers or the female pupils. We're hearing the same thing, and unfortunately not much has changed in the 10 years since it happened to me, which is very frustrating.
No, absolutely. And I mean, there was an incident in my constituency of the school that the teachers felt that they were being intimidated in that way. But can I get your kind of reaction then? I had maybe some approach from parents in that situation where they were the parents to young boys in the school and felt that the boys then because they were being asked to participate in some kind of programs to try and address the issue, those parents almost felt like their sons were being targeted and almost, how dare you make my son do this training because he's a good boy? But what would you say to parents who maybe feel that way about it, and I guess articulate the context better to overcome that?
I think that's one of the, very, very quickly. So I would be recommending, and that's why we need the bystander approach brought into schools. And if we are approaching this at a systemic level, we're not then putting in targeted support when it happens. If everybody is already having RSE that is preventative in nature, focuses on healthy relationships and consent, then you're not going to think all of a sudden you're targeting my boy. But like gender stereotypes and this behaviour harms boys and girls. It's not like one or the other. We are about education. That's what we're passionate about, so that's what we need to do.
Brilliant, thank you so much.
Sorry, can I just say a point?
I know my colleagues
being inclusive, but it's not just teachers. It's classroom assistants and support staff and all. The attacks are happening too, so it's just to make the point.
Understood. Thank you for that, Jeanette. Cara, you'd indicated next.
Hopefully you can hear me okay. Thank you so much to the panel for being here. Really comprehensive overview of the significant challenges in our education system. I think you really touched on the element of sexual harassment in our schools, which is, I think, a much bigger issue than many might realise. We've seen the really infamous case of the upskirting incident of a teacher in Northern Ireland, and one real profound concern I have is now around meta glasses. I'm not too sure if you know what they are, but essentially they can record, and they can record teachers, pupils. They can be used in bathrooms. I'm just curious if that's something you've heard about or know of any incidents in our schools that we as a committee just might not be aware of.
We have worked very closely with Professor Claire McGlynn, and she does discuss all of this work, and I know you're aware of her work too, Cara. And so, yes, we are aware of that, but I think that comes back to the point Mary made around AI. It is about looking at what the harms are of that, and that we need to actually think about legislation. These things only exist for one reason. They exist to abuse and degrade and humiliate, and Notify apps and those Google Glasses are only there to do that. And we're just going to see an increased rise in that if we don't work at a legislative level to look about how we're making those tech companies accountable for what they're producing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And can I just ask you off the back of that then, we've seen the kind of, I believe it's £885,000 went into creating the Safer Schools NI and the support mechanisms that are there. Do you think they're sufficient enough? Do you think they're value for money? Do you think anything is missing that we as a committee should be acting on?
I think with the safer school stuff, there's a lack of awareness among school staff. Their actual TikTok guidance and their little flowchart around teacher targeted bullying is really effective. But every time it happens in school, I'm sending that out to our reps. So I would say that schools aren't necessarily buying into that safer schools. And you might be aware what the statistics are of that. But I think again, it comes back to we have a whole school approach. We have an institutional framework. We can identify where the training gaps are, and then we can use the resources and those organisations that we have that can deliver that support, because their training is very good. But when I was at a recent conference in the UK, I mentioned Safer Schools NI. 4 people in the room out of 200 women put their hands up that they'd heard out of it.
Wow.
And
so
those
there really is
yeah.
that challenge with connecting the dots. So maybe good resources are there that need to be tweaked a little, but it's the public awareness campaign, I suppose, of what's actually available to the public. Okay.
I think there's a lot of brilliant work going on, and a lot of it is done by the voluntary community sector, but it can't be a one-hit wonder, going in and delivering. And I've been delivering some of that workshops in Fermanagh, I know one myself. Going in and doing that's really good, and it's really great to have that engagement. But I think the difficulty is where's the follow through with that? What happens if those issues are raised after that? We know young people compartmentalise things and go, oh, that applied that day whenever I did that training, but they're not necessarily thinking, oh, that's how it actually works in their lives on a day-to-day basis. So I think it's really important that there is a portal where all of those resources sit, and I know the End Violence Against Women and Girls strategy does talk about that, but it doesn't matter if it's there if nobody knows about it.
Absolutely. No, you're speaking my language. No, that's it for me, and I really, it speaks a lot to where we are and the gaps with the resources being there, but them not being utilised. But no, that's extremely helpful, and I have asked the Minister a question today on what guidance has been given on meta glasses, because it seems to be very fast moving. So I'll follow up with yourself when he answers that question for that.
That would be really useful, and because Claire McGlynn did a presentation at our Equalities Conference last year on meta glasses, so we can share some of that information with
Brilliant.
You as well.
I'd love that. Thank you
okay,
so much.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chair, just to note as well, given we're talking about AI, outside of my role as an MLA, a declaration of interest, I do a few hours a year to do with AI ethics. Thank you.
Thank you, Cara. That's great, and that'll be noted. Kathy, you'd indicated next.
Thanks, Chair. And Sally, just on the outset, thanks very much for that. I'm dealing with a case as well. And you mentioned around reporting of it and the amount of reporting of it. It's that unreported that frightens me, because the case I'm dealing with is she can't report it because it shows a weakness to those males, and the fear of actually reporting it, and there kind of being a chink there, and her being even more vulnerable at that point as well. So just thanks for that work that you're doing on that. Marie, I just wanted to come back to some of the SENREG stuff. I was in a meeting last week, and there was about 30 principals and teachers of trade union reps at it. The EA and DE were there, and everything that you guys are saying here was mentioned and in granular detail, because we had classroom assistants, Senkos, and everybody there. The bit that got me was the response from the EA was almost like shock and surprise, that they didn't realise that this was an issue, they didn't realise that all this was happening. What would your thoughts be on that?
I would say, because I'm part of the trade union group that sits in consultation, and I use that in the loosest possible term, meetings with the EA and this, we raise these matters with them on an ongoing monthly and quarterly basis. This is not new information to them. Every interaction they have, I would say, with anybody who has responsibility for SEN in schools at the minute, they've heard this from. So how they're not actually hearing it astounds me. How they're not hearing it from the workforce that they have in the lit teams that are trying to deliver it, how they're not hearing it from the schools who are struggling to get them through the different pathways and the challenges that have been for that. I don't know how they could sit in a room and have that response back to the assembled group there, because it was quite comprehensive from early years right the way through that group, and they were saying it consistently. And this is where some of the terminology that they use in regards to things like early intervention, and you say that to a school leader and they go, yeah, right, what does that actually mean? By the time they're getting to P6 or P7, because that's not early intervention in our book. We know from children arrive, and I've taught nursery, from they arrive into nursery and you have conversations with parents because they've had conversations with health visitors, that there are things that are going to develop over the next few years, and we know we have to be starting to make stepping stones and scaffolds in there for schools, and then we hit the wall every time we need outside agency support. And it's only for the tenacity and the integrity of the staff and the schools that they push boundaries as far as they can on their own capabilities in looking for and seeking out support for those young people that take them as far as they go. And that's where the system and the regulations and the code is letting them down. And we can't allow that to continue.
And that message was very clear last week as well. That the system is only not collapsed at the minute because of the work of the SENCOs, the classroom assistants, teachers, school leaders, all of the support staff. And there was actually a round of applause for one of the vice principals there who had said that they had successfully got a child on pathway 3. And she got a round of applause because no one else had managed to do it, which is ridiculous. Just something, Jeanette, that you picked up on there around the consultation, and you mentioned around the career progression. And what I am hearing back is that when you're replying to these consultations and you hear career progression, of course you're going to agree to career progression, and of course you're going to think that's a good thing, but there's no detail on it, and the fear out there is that it's going to be, well, the feedback on this was so positive and that nothing's going to change out of it. Would you agree? Have you heard that back as well?
Absolutely, and to be honest, even the questionnaire was skewed to give a positive reaction. Who's going to disagree with having more, facilities for children and bringing children through and having career paths for class? Who's going to disagree with all of that? But there was no way to disagree, exactly. Or to put the negative points coming through or what concerns would be. So absolutely, that is the big fear, and it's there from years and years of trying different things and just not being followed through, and that's where the pause would possibly give us then, once the consultation is finished and they can see where the direction is likely to go, that's when the pause needs to happen so that they can have the consultation with the unions that represent the staff, and we can get it right from the start, because there's a lot of good stuff in it if we could just get it right from the start, but it's the piecemeal bit that is concerning.
Just on that point about stalling and pausing, when that was referenced last week at that meeting, it was like, we can't do this, we can't pause. If we pause, it's all going to collapse and it's going to be a disaster. So there was kind of like a fear instilled in that room that day to say, no, we have to trudge on through with this, we have to keep going, and you calling for this to be stalled or paused is dangerous. In actual fact, is what they were trying to say. What would you say to that?
Well, it doesn't make sense, because everything we do in education is about monitoring and evaluating our work in the classroom. Well, why would we not monitor and evaluate at system level? It doesn't make sense. And that's what they're trying to do. They're forcing it through without giving that space for that monitoring, the evaluation. And if you need to take a step back or a step sideways, there's no room for that in what they're currently suggesting.
Okay, thank you.
Finish there with that. And Donna, you'd indicated next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And to follow on from that, as we heard that from the Children's Law Centre last week, they're saying that some of the SEN regs and is actually being implemented through the back door. So it's already happening, and they're really worried about that. My fear is then that the department will dig their heels in, or the EA, whatever, both of them, dig their heels in, because there's no plan B. But here's the problem we're going to be faced with. Like, if they try and push on through, like, they're being asked to pause by those who work on it every single day. Yourselves are asking for it to be paused. What would you say to them to say, well, no, we're not pausing, we're just going to push on through? The danger of that is the regs get voted down.
And they create a system that's imbalanced for everybody. And we have attempted to pause things on the basis of things were not legislation. So say, for example, the PLPs, the unions, the teaching unions put a pause on that with their membership and said, you have robust documentation in school, continue to use that until this is regulation, because who knows what might change in the interim period. But then it got to the point where schools were putting in submissions for referrals, and when they didn't have the documentation on the right piece of paper, then it was sent back to the schools, and there was frustration level at schools. So by a sideways loop, they brought it through. So more and more schools are complying with the PLP, even though it continues not to be something that's statutory. And that that then dilutes the focus that we're trying to have on there, because a lot of this stuff is not workload proofed and is not proven that it's not working. If you're saying one Senko said that they for the first time got a pathway 3 through, it's not working in that context either. So there's something wrong in it somewhere, and you know, they're going to force people's hands in another way if they continue to push this on, and it's not working for anybody, and they can't. We're going to have more and more colleagues walking away from these roles of responsibilities in school through sheer frustration that they've done everything possible that they could to make it work. The support staff are the same. They just hit their head against the wall. They can go no further with stuff, and that's not good for anybody in the long term. So I would have concerns around that.
And that's a real fear that I have, because I hear it every day that our teachers, support staff, Senkos, they're actually looking out.
Yeah.
And you're losing that expertise.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I suppose when you get to the consultation side of it, there's an awful lot happening in the education system, and my fear is it's just you bombard it and you flood it that much, then the agenda that they want to get through gets through. And I have lost a lot of trust in where the direction of travel's going, because I am keeping an eye across what's happening across the water and the white papers that are going through there. And when you look at it, really, what are they trying to do? They're taking away legal protections. Mm-hmm. And I have a fear that that's exactly what's going to happen here as well. More onus gets put on to schools and school leaders, and the legal protections are gone.
And as school leaders become more familiar with what this piece of work is in before, that's the concerns they have as well. Where you would have had that interventions and support from EA, anything that you read in the enhanced support model seems to dilute that under the auspices of autonomy. But with autonomy comes responsibility and consequence if things go wrong. And as I said in my presentation, when the challenge comes to the provision, will it come to the door of the school in the Senko, or will it come in at EA's level? Or if it comes into the school and they approach EA, will the response be, well, you made that decision, so you have to deal with the consequences of it now? And that's not fair in the system for anybody. And it's not what people are familiar with or the expectation of the support that they want to have available to them, because it's a lonely enough place being in leadership in schools at the minute, and particularly whenever there's challenge then, because everybody goes in trying to do their best any day, and nobody makes a decision that they want to see impacting in a negative way. But when challenge comes your direction, you're left very much out there on a limb, and that's difficult because people sign up to take these roles on out of the want to see a betterment for the children in the system and to support the families and communities that they live in and predominantly work and live in, and so can meet people down the street, and that can impact how they operate on a daily basis too, and that's for everybody in the school community.
Thank you. I'd be remiss me if I didn't take this opportunity to talk about and supporting the free school meals, universal free school meals, and I do think that could probably be achieved through a phased approach, and it's something that I will be trying my best to work on maybe in the next term. But I do have a private members bill going through right now, which is the end holiday hunger and target children during the holiday period, and I just want to sort of like plug it here and ask for your support as well while I have you in front of me.
Oh, that's right, and you'll be aware then as well, we have our free school meal pledge that is ongoing with all the MLA, so I know quite a few in the room have already signed up to that, so if we can just keep that going and encourage that participation, that would be very welcome. Thanks.
Great. Never miss an opportunity to John, you'd indicated next.
Yeah, thank you for all your evidence. Sally, I thought yours was very compelling. I think this is a taboo issue which has not been discussed. Both physical assault and sexual harassment and abuse. So stand in solidarity with you. I did a speech yesterday in the Assembly about it. 2,500 assaults on teachers. 2,000 of those were classroom assistants. Mm-hmm. There's some issues around having the right resource, training, support for dealing with children who are dysregulated, but some of this is just non-SEN children who are just badly behaved and bullying. One thing I want to say, and I agree entirely, I think a lot of this is phone driven as well. I just want to make this observation first and then I'll ask the question. I do think our society has got itself into the situation where we almost see the rights of the victim and the perpetrator as the same, but they're not the same. We should be on the side of the victim when we balance rights because they're the victim. And the issue of we've got violence against women and girls in Northern Ireland, which sees 30 women murdered, it starts in school with these attitudes. So I think this is so important that we grip it. I don't want to make this party political, but I have a real concern that there is a move to change the minimum age criminal responsibility. One member of this House has said 16. So anyone under the age of 16 cannot commit an offence. The police cannot intervene. That's Jerry Carroll. A broader group have said 14, with only exceptions for rape, murder, attempted murder, and one other. Effectively, all the behaviours you talked about there would not be a crime. There would not be any criminal consequence. I'm deeply concerned for the behaviour that will arise from that. I asked the Justice Minister whether she'd done an assessment of the impact of violence against women and girls, and she said she hadn't. So do you have any concern about lowering the age of minimum criminal responsibility from where it is now, well, it's 10, up to 14, which is very likely to go through this House, and what impact that might be having in your schools?
I suppose the first thing I would say is this is something that we have to consider yet within the broader trade union movement with ICTU. We are ready to discuss that paper, and we haven't come out with a policy position on that, and the same with NSUWT. But I mean, I personally would have grave concerns because the pupil who upskirted me was only 14. There was no legal recompense or law there that prevented that behaviour until we changed the law and introduced that legislation. But I think it goes further than that. What we need, you said initially there that it starts in school. It doesn't, it starts at home.
I get that.
And so we need to be educating the parents and the carers, and we need to make sure those harms that are already happening aren't then compounded. So I think, I have grave concerns about the lowering that age of criminal responsibility, but I would also say, we also understand that young people are, risk takers by the very nature of growing up, but we also have to educate them about what that reckless behaviour looks like, and again, what the harm is on the person they're perpetrating that against. So I don't think lowering the age of criminal responsibility or increasing it, rather, it is going to, I'm not sure what the thinking is around that. I think we would need to look at and see how many young people are actually in the criminal justice system already, and what the move is around that, because you then think those acts of violence that are happening in schools, and you alluded to the 2,500. The reason that's only standing at 500 is because the TNC 2011/2 is not being followed. Schools are not reporting to the TNC across the board what those incidents of violence are. And the other level of that, as Cara mentioned, is we tend to view non-touch based technology assisted abuse not as an act of violence. So I think before we start talking about how we legislate or what we do with the criminal age of responsibility, we need to actually backtrack and start with the education piece and ensuring that people know how you treat people with respect and equality.
Yeah, and I'll just follow that up with, and I was in the law enforcement for a long time, and very, very few children are actually prosecuted, but the police can intervene, they can seize a phone, they can investigate. There is the sense that what you've done is a crime, and it is a matter of fact that if this legislation goes through in this mandate, as I suspect it will on the current voting, upskirting and downblousing by a 13.5-year-old is not a crime. Punching a teacher and breaking their nose is not a crime. The police will say that person has not committed a crime. I don't think it's been well thought through. I want to put that in the record, and I think it's a problem for education as well as, and Danny's shaking his head, but that is a fact. It's not nonsense.
It is nonsense.
I'm putting it on the record. I'm really worried about this and the long-term impact it's going to have. Can I just ask one thing about...
John, very short on time. We'd have to be a very final question.
The Education Minister for an injury reduction plan. So we were in a different public sector organisation, say the prison service, and there was a high level of assaults. They would develop a strategy for what's our plan to reduce injuries. The Minister hasn't committed to giving one. Do you think an injury reduction strategy that actually says on a document, here's what I'm doing to reduce the number of injuries, harassment, intimidation, would be useful?
Yes, very much so, and I think that I'm just going to be very brief. If you look at what's laid out in the TNC 2011 and the framework that is just being finalised today, that's going out to all EA, controlled schools and CCMS, the issue we have is because it doesn't apply, that policy and framework isn't applying across the board for our support staff colleagues as well. I think all schools should have those risk assessments in place to reduce injury, but you can't do that if you're not reporting it. We know if it's not reported, not recorded, it's not managed, and that is the situation we're currently in and the one we're trying to rectify. But we need to ensure that all assaults are covered within that and not just physical violence.
And you have a benchmark.
We do need to draw a line at that stage. Thank you, John. And David, you'd indicate.
Thanks very much, Chair. I wasn't going to. I think I've got lots of useful information from there, and I always say that I'm not going to ask a question if I don't have a question. But the only one I wanted to sort of touch on, because I think we sort of skirted over it, was the, no pun intended there actually, but in terms of the phones in schools and what a driver that is in terms of that kind of behaviour in schools. How prevalent, in your experience, is that, and how do you think that having phone-free school would improve the environment for teaching staff and classroom assistants?
I think there's a range of research that has been done around the impact it has, not just on incidents of abusing teachers, but also improving engagement and concentration in schools. So, it's kind of beneficial to young people not to have that break, to actually be enabled to have that break. We're already seeing the influence of their access to social media and how that's played out in terms of the things that they're doing in school. But I would say the thing with phones is, you mentioned earlier about recording. Teachers are already being recorded. These images are being taken, not necessarily, they may not be sexual in nature originally, but then they're being used for AI generation. We also know now that it's going to be very difficult for any of us to post images of children on the internet, in terms of school promoting activities, because those are actually then being used and being manipulated into pornographic situations. So, why, I think we need to go back to the question, why does a child need access to its school now, its phone in school? And I think a lot of schools have a not seen, not heard policy. And I have been in schools where when the young people are going to the toilet, the teacher has gone, give me your phone. Mm-hmm. So, but, and there's a lot it's about getting the parents on side as well, because a lot of parents want their children, and I come from a rural environment, and so they were worried about them getting home and all those safety concerns. So it's quite complex. But if we had a system level where we said, you're not using your phone in school, and these are the protocols we're going to put in place. The difficulty is, if you just do a phone-wide ban and no kind of mechanism for that, teachers end up policing that, and then that can lead to more conflict and more difficulties with behaviour. So I think it has to be really thought out. It can't just be no phones in school and an outright ban. It's how that's actually managed on the ground. And actually we maybe just need to look at where that's going well for schools, and what is it about the culture in that school where they are doing that effectively. But I definitely think the access to the phone and how it's being used is very much at the centre of not just abusing teachers, but also pupils, and that level of bullying that goes on, and they can't switch off and they can't concentrate because they're constantly thinking about what's going on social media or on their phones. And
Notwithstanding the discussion, I'm not trying to make a party political point here, notwithstanding the discussion around costs and all the debate there will be about everything in the education system around that, do you think that the pouch pilot that is currently being run is a possible solution to that balances the need for some pupils to have some access to a phone, but keeps it locked away? I know there's workarounds and things like that, but
I think I would want to see how successful that has been on a day-to-day management. We've already referenced the fact that workload for teachers is at an all-time high. We don't want to then add another burden of policing the phone use and how that system works.
Is that not a role though that they're already having to do?
Yes.
And it's almost a tool that tries to remove that, where from what I've seen of it, you have the unlockers of the school gates where you can only unlock it as you're leaving the school premises.
Yeah,
so it's obviously, if there's people breaking the rules, you're going to have that, but you're always going to have some element of that, I guess.
Yes.
And it's there at the moment.
Yeah, and I think from what I've heard from some staff in schools, there's issues around the technology and how effective it is, and how easy it is to kind of get around. And and as you say, all young people are going to find workarounds. Yeah. So I think until we see the actual evidence of how effective that's been and the cost implications, we're already crippled with cost implications. And why do we need to introduce a pouch to say you're not allowed to use your phone in school. You know, it's the aspect of you have to give a rule that actually should be followed because that is the rule of the school, as opposed to you have to put it in a pouch because that's the only way we can control your access.
I think it's the
so
element
lack of responsibility.
trying to find an imperfect solution necessarily, but to exactly what you've said around how do you have a deterrent in that way, but which doesn't require the teacher to always be the policeman in that regard. But
Restriction, right?
And I think possibly, just if I could add to that,
sure.
where this is predominantly a post-primary issue, it's creeping into the primary schools too, and where the pilots have been, they've been in the post-primaries, and there's significant implications starting to creep into the primary sector as well. So
I've no doubt why, I wanted a mobile phone myself when I was sort of leaving primary school.
It isn't how many get them for their at certain point.
Well, the difference is now
P4,
I was
P5,
playing Snake and now it's a PC in your pocket. So it's
And there's a lot of pressure on parents to provide that smartphone technology, and there's a cost implication there as well.
Certainly.
No,
I agree.
The record, I most definitely didn't have a primary school when I was leaving, but that possibly dates me. Must have been easily a good decade on you there, David. Julie, you'd indicate.
Thank you, Chair, and panel members. Thank you very much for being here and for all the information you've shared. I was just touching on the same point as David, but my interest was in primary school pupils, so I was wondering how big is the issue? Do we have the data there? And it also in terms of like violence in primary schools, is that as prevalent or getting there or much less?
I would say that it's an increasing issue in primary schools, and I would say from P4 onwards there is that kind of call to have a phone, and I often had quite a collection in the top drawer of my desk when they were discovered, and then they were just put in an envelope and handed back sort of thing. But a phone call had to be made home to say we found it in school, just letting you know it's in their bag and whatever. So there was added, as Sally said, that policing element of stuff in school, and I suppose it's like anything. Young people, regardless of age, and when they're in those transition points of life, when they're starting to leave primary school, moving to post-primary, that's when you start to see the escalation of other behaviours that wouldn't have been prevalent up to that point, So I don't know that there's anything measurable for it. I don't know there's been any data collected in relation to it, but on a incidental, on a kind of, hearing it back from colleagues, it's becoming an increasing issue. Yeah.
I think that's everybody who's been in. I just wanted to raise a point just in relation to some of the comments that John had raised, and I'm conscious we are in the Education Committee, not the Justice Committee, but I think around the lowering the age of criminal responsibility, I think there is undoubtedly a balance to be struck between throwing the book at a young person and actually making sure you can deliver an intervention that addresses the behaviour so it doesn't repeat. I think there's a lot of good international evidence when the age of criminal responsibility is higher that youth offending rates reduce, and I've heard some of John's former colleagues in the PSNI express views similar to that, but again, conscious we are in the Education Committee. Really appreciate the evidence, a huge amount of ground covered there, and I was very conscious that we were having to keep an extremely tight watch on time, and we're still over time, so apologies if anybody felt they weren't able to fully address all of the issues that were being raised. So I'm happy to conclude the session there, unless there are any specific items of follow-up that anybody wants to suggest, either through the clerk or any members.
Just come in afterwards.
That's fine. Any specific items of follow-up? No? Okay, well we can certainly note some of the evidence in relation to the regulations.
Yeah, I'm hoping to bring the RSE report to the committee in the next week or so, so I'll maybe factor in some of those points.
Thank you. The one the Minister made fun of?
Sorry?
Is that the one the Minister made fun of?
Yes.
Should be noted.
Really sounded like a serious issue today, but there we have it.
I think, to be fair, the minister was making fun of the timeline that and how long it's taken to come forward. So I think that's not.
You said we wasted our time talking about it. We should balance our time.
Spend an awful lot of time talking about it when there's other priorities in education.
I'm going to draw that conversation to a close, and thank you all for your time today.
Thank you.
So next item on the agenda, then it's item 7, and it is a further briefing. Sorry, apologies, something you'd wanted to come in.
You covered a fair bit of it there, but I think it's only fair to say I can't speak on behalf of another West Belfast MLA, but Jerry Carroll's not here, but I've never once heard him ever say in the chamber anywhere else that if someone done something that they never be held responsible for. Raising the age of criminal responsibility is not about taking away or saying you can just do something and with no consequences. Far from it, and you said that around the evidence. I think it's a wee bit underhanded to use it within this evidence to talk about another member who isn't here. To be fair, and maybe this member longs for the good old days of the RUC, but I really hope that the criminal age responsibility is raised.
Can I write a reply? And I'm not going to get into the...
entirely appropriate. John should have a right of reply, but I would ask it be a brief right of reply, because I am conscious we are in the Education Committee here, not the Justice Committee.
And there's an intersection here between justice and education. If you lower the age limit, raise the age limit, you cannot even investigate the incident, so you can't seize phones, you can't interview people, you can't put people in bail conditions. What I said was factually accurate.
Children.
Okay, if a 15-and-a-half-year-old punches a female teacher, there is no criminal consequence. The police cannot intervene if the amendment's passed. Those are the facts, and they're indisputable.
I think those issues will undoubtedly be covered on the floor of the Assembly when that particular amendment is debated. So, item 7 on the agenda then, and if the witnesses for that item want to come forward, it's an oral briefing by the Northern Ireland Teachers Council, and it is also in relation to the SL1 on the Special Educational Needs Regulations 2026. So we have a briefing note from the committee clerk at page 60, and just while witnesses are getting seated, I would welcome Joanne White, President of the National Association of Head Teachers, Pauline Hurst, member of the Ulster Teachers Union, Maxine Murphy-Higgins from the National Association of Schoolmasters Union of Women Teachers. Sorry, apologies, I gave you the full title there, might have been easier to abbreviate. Brona Wright from the National Education Union, and Noreen Kelly, member of INTO. So thank you all, you're very welcome here at committee. So I'm just going to really hand over straight away for opening remarks and presentation, and I really would ask to bear in mind the time scales of up to 10 minutes for a presentation, and I will probably have to bring your remarks to a close if we go past that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. I'm very conscious that we might overlap with some of the previous evidence you've just heard, and as you said, I'm Maxine Murphy-Higgins from the NISUWT, and there are a number of key concerns that we wanted to raise with you today around the SEN regulations and essentially their implementation through the SEN reform agenda and the proposed enhanced support model. To begin with, while the Department of Education's reform agenda published in February 25 sets out an ambitious 5-year vision for delivering the right support, there are significant concerns about how this vision will actually be achieved in practice. In particular, there's no clear roadmap explaining how we'd move from the current system where we are to the proposed end state. We're seeing major structural changes being proposed, especially around the one-to-one support model, without any clear alternative frameworks being put in place. Alongside this, the proposed timeline raises serious concerns. It's overly ambitious, particularly given that schools are already managing multiple large-scale reforms, including Transform Ed, the curriculum review and the workload agreements. There also appears to be no meaningful time built in for reviews, adjustments or feedback. It's important to note that the three pathway model and the local impact teams were only introduced in September 2025, and already we are seeing acknowledgement of over 1,400 different combinations of need. This highlights the complexity of the system and raises questions about whether the current proposals are realistic or achievable. We also have concerns about the survey, as many of the questions, and you raised it in the last session, are limiting meaningful consultation and without further clarification on many key elements of the proposal. The consultation questions appear to lead respondents to agree to an ideal scenario model and risks destabilising the entire system before alternatives are fully resourced, established and available to all schools and pupils. We have been told in a recent meeting, as recently as yesterday, that there's been 2,500 responses to the consultation, which are mainly positive, which highlights the issue we have with the consultation questions, as we've already discussed. So in summary, while the ambition is welcome, and we can't disagree with what we all want, which is early intervention, we want the interventions for children as young as possible, the lack of clear and realistic implementation strategy is a significant concern. I'm now going to pass on to Pauline.
Okay, moving on to evidence, capacity and workforce planning. A major concern is the lack of clear, practice-based evidence underpinning these reforms.
There is no transparency around the outcomes of pilot projects, and no clear indication of what will happen to existing pilots before a final model is implemented. We have not seen published evaluations, measurable outcomes, or clear learning from these pilots, which makes it very difficult to understand how they are informing the proposed direction of travel. We have limited evidence that this model has been tested successfully. Without robust, locally relevant evidence, there is a real risk that reforms are being introduced without a full understanding of how these will operate in practice within our Northern Ireland school system. At the same time, our system is already under significant strain. The Education Authority is currently unable to meet demand in key services such as education psychology, speech and language therapy, and wider allied health support. Schools are experiencing long delays in accessing assessments and interventions, placing increased pressure on teachers and school leaders to manage complex needs without the necessary specialist input. Given this context, it is unclear how the system will cope with additional change, particularly when proposals suggest reducing or altering the one-to-one support model without a clearly defined and properly resourced alternative in place. For many children, one-to-one support is critical for them to access the curriculum and education in general. Any changes to this model must be supported by clear evidence and demonstrable capacity. Workforce planning is another critical gap. There has been no detail provided on the number of specialists required, no clear recruitment timelines, and no evidence that existing workforce data has been used to inform planning. There is no clarity on how current recruitment and retention challenges across education and allied health professions will be addressed to ensure delivery of these reforms. Importantly, while there has been a stated commitment to upskilling classroom assistants and teaching staff, there is currently no clear or detailed plan outlining how this will be achieved. There is no information on the nature of training, timelines for delivery, funding, or how consistency and quality will be ensured across the system. There's an absence of clarity around how ongoing professional development will be embedded, how staff will be supported to adapt to new models of provision, and how workload implications will be managed. Overall, these reforms are being proposed without clear evidence, without sufficient capacity, and without a comprehensive or actionable workforce plan to deliver delivery. Proceeding on this basis risks placing further strain on an already pressured system and undermining the effectiveness of support for children with special educational needs in our country.
Good afternoon. In addition to my role within the INTO, I am a full-time SENCO and acting Vice Principal in my primary school. And so with that in mind, I'm here today to share with you the reality of what this SEND reform agenda and proposed enhanced support model looks like for us on the ground, dealing with its impact on a daily basis. And my message to you is a simple one. You have heard this time and time again as an education committee. Schools, and in particular those of us in the SENCO role, are overwhelmed by the current pace of change. There are so many changes coming at us, and things are simply moving too fast. To be clear, we support SEN reform. Reform is necessary, but I'm pleading with you in your role to do what you can to slow this process down and to make sure that we get this reform right. There is no question the enhanced support model is going to place significant additional responsibility on those of us in schools, our school leaders and our SENCOs. We are expected to contribute to the needs-focused statements of children, complete requests for involvement and design support packages within what are described as minimum standards. However, there is no clarity on what these minimum standards actually involve or what resources will be available to help us meet them. And at the same time, school SENCOs will be expected to monitor progress, evaluate impact and provide detailed data reporting. And all this is happening in the context where our SENCOs already do not have sufficient time to meet our current statutory duties. You're all well aware on this committee the SENCO workload and burnout. It has been well reported and is well documented. Accountability is another major concern for us. If parents challenge the provisions set out within their child's statement, the responsibility for responding may now shift directly to us in schools. Currently, this responsibility sits largely with the Education Authority, including tribunals. I am currently having first-hand experience of this, and our very real concern is that the proposed changes represent a significant shift in both workload and legal responsibility without clear guidance and support. I would also welcome questions later on how this will impact those of our schools like my own that have SPIM classes, the special provision classes in mainstream. We also have serious concerns around resourcing and training needed to drive this reform. We do not yet know what the resources will be provided, whether a workload impact assessment on these proposed changes has actually been carried out, or whether staff will receive the necessary training, what that training will look like, and whether staff will receive the necessary time to implement the changes effectively. We have very little confidence in how the changes associated with SEN reform and the proposed enhanced support model will be funded. Case in point, SENCOs were allocated 2 sub-funded days to attend the recent readiness for commencement of the new Code of Practice training delivered by our SEND Implementation and Development team. And at this point, I wish it to be noted on record that that training was excellent, and our SENCOs need more of this face-to-face training by the SEN team. However, the funded Day 2 training, which had been initially allocated to allow us then time to assimilate the training received back in our schools, was pulled at the last minute. And this hardly inspires confidence when investment for the people who are going to be the ones tasked with enacting these changes just isn't there. Cutting this vital funding is simply not good enough. It's disrespectful at best, and it sends the message that our role is not deemed worthy of the investment, which causes anger when you consider the immense expense of the Minister's Transformation in Education Roadshow last week. The same applies to our school SEN budgets. Where is the ring-fence time and the ring-fence funding to enable our SENCOs to carry out our statutory duties? This lack of investment simply isn't good enough, and it does not bode well for the future. It's as if this proposed reform agenda that the department has designed and built a car, but parts of the car are still missing, and they've neglected to put the fuel in it by not investing properly in the people they need to drive it. Finally, while the model promotes a needs-led approach, schools are understandably concerned that we may be identifying needs for which no resources are actually currently available. We just need to look at the local impact teams who are trying to operate without full staff capacity. In conclusion, in school, we are asked to do significantly more without clarity and without the adequate resources and support in place. So we must ask for the SENCO role to be formally recognised as a strategic leadership position requiring ring-fenced funding and non-contact time. We also ask for the commission of a formal review of the SENCO role, its expectations and resourcing to reflect current realities, and finally the provision of adequate resourcing, training and technical support for SEN digital systems to reduce unnecessary administrative burden.
Thank you. Brona Wright, 40 years experience of education in Northern Ireland, the last 15 years within the ODIS support services. We really want to highlight concerns regarding accountability, equity and funding. Firstly, there is a lack of clarity around what essential standards are going to be. It is not clear who will define these standards, how they will be applied, or what happens if a school cannot provide the support outlined in them. This raises concerns around placing schools in what could only be described as legal straitjackets. They've nowhere to go. There is also a risk that the proposed monitoring and benchmarking systems, if they go ahead, there'll be a league table culture where schools will be compared, to each other on, SEN outcomes without, sufficient recognition of the complexity and diversity of need for each of those children. Equity is another key issue. Local capacity varies so greatly, particularly for small primary schools in rural areas. There's a real risk that children will not receive consistent levels of support across different regions. From a financial perspective, while the reforms that are presented as improving outcomes, and this is what we're told, there is a perception that they may be primarily down and driven to cost considerations. There is no clarity.
Quickly, just through the last parts of for the two.
Okay. So there's no clarity regarding funding. We're really worried about the workforce investment. There's no clear information for schools about the pots of funding that will be available and when they'll be available, because that's really important for schools, how they plan. It makes it very, very difficult for schools to plan, for them to recruit, and for them to make decisions. Within, the use of AI, it's so important that we really, really look at that. It's a brilliant tool, but there's a real caution. Okay, internationally, there are ongoing concerns about, technology, particularly for children with SEN. We need clear guidance to ensure that technology supports education rather than replaces effective teaching practice. Okay, and without this clarity on funding, accountability and equity, there's a significant risk that this reform will head, it will reduce provision for our young people. We cannot allow this system to be set up to fail.
Apologies, Bruna, I'm going to have to ask you to draw remarks to a close. And Joanne would need to be very, very brief.
I will be very quick, Nick, thank you. I just wanted to commend my colleagues here for everything that they have said. But as an overview, I would just like to say, where is the child in this? Mm-hmm. I took a day yesterday to plough through this stuff and I didn't get to the end of any of it. But there seemed to be page after page after page of exceptions that the Education Authority could use to not produce a statement. And very, very little about the people who are actually going to enact this, like the Learning Support Coordinator. At the minute, so much of this is untested. And what has been rolled out in the past year, it has not been successful. I mean, you were there last week. It has not been successful. And, for governors to be expected to provide reasonable time for the Learning Support Coordinator to take on these extra posts, nobody has any idea what that is. I just think that it is too much, too fast, too soon, untested, and these are our most vulnerable children, and yet again we're going to try something and see if it works. It's not good enough.
Thank you to all of you, and apologies to have had to rush presentations in any way there. We have just 3 massive briefings on the agenda today on these issues, so I will just ask one question. I think it's clear that there are really quite fundamental concerns being highlighted around the SEN reform agenda, but on the other hand there is an acknowledgement across the board that we need to reform how we deliver SEN support services. So if you could ask one thing, or not one thing, if you could ask in terms of the next step from the EA and department to deliver SEN reform but that brings the teaching workforce and school leaders with them, what would that look like? What should our next step be?
Can I jump in there, please, just as somebody who is dealing with this on the ground? Slow down, okay? We have a real opportunity here to make meaningful change and to make reform successful, but need to slow down. You've heard it from the Children's Law Centre last week as well. We echo what they are saying. There's, as we've acknowledged, there are some good parts of this. Why can't we slow it down and embed what is currently in place now? Changes have already occurred. So we need to take the time now to make sure that those are done properly. We need to build our local impact teams. as Maxine said, that they only came into operation in September of this year. They're still not fully at capacity. We need to build them up, and then for us in schools to use their services properly. We need health on board. We need to embed the use of the new portals and the new statutory assessment process. We need to ring fence the time and funding for the SENCOs, and we need a realistic budget to drive all of this forward.
Nick, could I just come in? And I think, as I set out, we need some sort of roadmap essentially to get from where we are now to there. I mean, I said out in my presentation, they have identified that there's 1,400 different needs there, and we know they're complex. And what I would like to see is, we know, working with health, say for example, we know, surely from those figures, we know how many speech therapists we need, we know how many educational psychologists we need, we know those allied health professionals that we need to support, as well as the teachers, as well as the other support staff that they need. So in my head, they already have those figures. They know what, so they can model that as to where we're going to go. So I think we need to see some sort of roadmap. And I think, as Noreen has already said, yes, we're dealing with these big reforms, but behind closed doors, so to speak, there's all these different changes to the systems as well, that everybody's having to get their head around. How do we use this? Never mind the actual changes of moving through it, the practicalities of it. So much has been thrown at schools at the minute, and I think we need a staged approach on this, because we need to understand. Because I know they're sort of saying in September it's going to be started off in September 26th. We're sitting here in May. Yeah. And to think that we're going to have that moved on any level, and all I can see, even with the local impact teams, we all know the reality is, with all the best will in the world, with them coming on board and the changes that made, that put further pressure on the system. Because for a period of time when those changes were coming in, children weren't actually being seen and weren't being supported, and schools weren't being supported. Bear in mind, and at least they sort of had half a plan as what the local impact teams were going to look like. They don't with this. And I think that's really, really concerning. I would really want to see a roadmap as to how we're going to do that. And in 5 years' time, here's the number of specialists we need to have in the system. And sorry, Nick, one other thing on this. Those local impact teams, and we've said it here before, the Department of Education did not put the money that was needed into those local impact teams. They're having to do business case after business case. I sound as if I'm from management side, but that has been ridiculous. And those local impact teams are not fully staffed as it is. So our members and our teachers and our young people, our pupils, are not getting the support they need at the minute.
So we've seen the erosion of specialist services, and we need to build those up. We need to look for the excellence, we need to get the training, and there needs to be investment. They can't be called specialist services and have specialists in them if they're not specialists. So that is a really, really important point.
I would just like to say
just
as well.
John, this would have to be the final point, and then I'll bring other members in.
The one thing that I would say is trust the profession. Yeah. We have hundreds of years between us here in the profession, but when you are filling in consultations that are slewed to give a certain answer, you just wonder what's the point, and you've consultation after consultation. The very people who this whole system depends on to deliver this are saying, whoa, just wait. This reform has the potential to be fantastic and has the potential to make the basis of SEN provision in the future so much better than it is at the minute, but not at this rushed pace, and not when you if you don't take into account the voice of the profession.
Thank you. So I'm going to bring the Deputy Chair in. Again, if I could ask both for members and witnesses to work with us around time. It may not be possible for each panel member to answer each question given the time constraints. And I do apologise that we're in that position, Deputy Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for coming in. And it's clear, what the message is today from yourselves and the previous contributors, that this is moving far too fast. There needs to be a pause, there needs to be greater scrutiny, and that's clear. So I don't need to ask you about that, is that okay? Maxine, you said it's known how many allied health professionals are needed. We have asked that question on numerous occasions, both the department and EA, and the allied health professionals themselves, and none of them have been able to give us an answer about the number of allied health professionals that are needed in the system. Can you enlighten us on that?
No, sorry, what I meant was they know how many, the complexity of the children that we've got in the system, so they should be able to model how many allied health professionals, and we have, a bit like yourself, we have asked that question because we have said, you're saying we're going to have all of this. Will you, if you know what our children are, we know the profile. Yeah. We know, I mean, they're able to look, we've got that in our general statistics. They know what the profile is, so they should be able to work out how many we need of each.
Agree with you, absolutely, and that was the way it was put to them. If you have X number of children with Y type of additional needs, then it's quite easy to match them up. But anyway, I know that's not.
Can I just bring something in there?
Sure.
I work in a speech and language centre, have done so for 27 years. So I see a huge increase in the number of children in our mainstream schools who have speech and language problems. And it's a huge concern where teachers are expected to work work with a child who has a sound system disorder, and it puts a lot of pressure on the teachers. So I think you asked for one ask. One of my asks would be that we have specialists working within our school system.
And Noreen, because you have said you're a SENCO, quite a number of people watch these committees. I don't know, they must have sad lives, but we're constantly being told by the EA and the department that the workload on SENCOs is actually being decreased because of the changes that are taking place. That's true, isn't it?
No, it is absolutely not, because the increase, we're having an increase in the number of children presenting with the need. So while there's an attempt to streamline and to reduce our workload, there's more and more children coming in, so there's more and more referrals to be completed. And as well as that, the new portals, there's significant wranglings that SENCOs we have to do to get round the portals, to get used to using them. This is new technology to us, and it's new to the services as well, you know. And the whole workload thing, I know it's well documented. I don't want to go over that because you're aware of all of that. But to say that no, our workload is reducing, no, that is absolutely not the case on the ground at all.
And I'll go in from the specialist provision. There's real issue with the teacher from the specialist provision having to link in with the SENCO from the child's mainstream school in order to meet together to complete referrals or to complete all those forms and documentation that needs to be provided.
Remember, the majority of our SENCOs in schools are full-time teachers as well. They are full-time teachers. They have all the obligations and the responsibilities of their classroom, and on top of this they have the SENCO role. And I know, Danny, you alluded earlier there to a recruitment and retention crisis. That's already happening with our SENCOs, and it's going to become increasingly more so.
Okay, thank you. That's me, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. Michelle, you'd indicated next.
Folks, thank you so much. Really, really, really excellent briefing, and you couldn't have been clearer on what you were saying. A couple of questions here because of time. You had mentioned that you questioned whether the department had carried out a workload assessment. Can I ask what you would want to see from that assessment?
Yes, well, we would really want to see clear working patterns for our SENCOs in schools. We want to look at how much time is actually being devoted to the SENCO, so that they're enabled to do their SENCO role separate from their teaching role. And we know it is clear there is the need for our SENCOs to have non-contact time to enable them to complete this role. And when the new code does eventually come into law, that role is going to be even more of a statutory role, and the responsibilities were there. So there's going to have to be a workload assessment. There has not been one done to date.
In terms of nursery principals who don't have their own SENCOs usually and they're carrying out both roles, do you think there's anything in the regs that's going to help with that, or is that something specifically they need to address as well?
I was just going to say, Pauline and I were involved in a workload review of SEN with the department in EA back in 2019. So we worked really hard over a year, and there was I think it was 82 recommendations, some short-term, mid-term and long-term. So the department and EA have a lot of this information already, and they've had it for a considerable amount of time. It's never been published yet, but a lot of the information is there that would really help and hasn't been implemented yet.
Okay, and finally, you've referenced, and lots of people have referenced, the need to pause and rationalise. Can I ask, when you say that, do you mean pause and rationalise within these specific SEN reforms, or do you mean that more broadly in terms of the wider reforms and the multiple reforms that are happening within education? Do you think we pause Transform Ed now and we prioritise SEN? Do you think within both of those things we prioritise the most important things within each? For me, generally, it feels like choose a few things and do them well than try to do lots of things at once and you're overwhelming everyone.
Yeah,
Which one do you think?
I think really in this instance we're talking about these SEN regulations because we are all involved with children with SEN, and it's not about, you know, for us it's not about workload. It's about when you have a workforce who doesn't understand what the regulations are, who haven't had the opportunity to go through the 400 odd pages of everything and work out what actually does this mean for me on the ground. Is this better? Is this going to be better for the children or not? Because essentially that's what we're calling for. You know, they have been written in such a way that there's such a lack of clarity and detail that it's really hard to know what the consequences of enacting this would be. So it's really a pause so that we can go through everything in finer detail and work out the actual day-to-day nitty-gritty of what this would mean for children in schools.
Yeah. Maxine talked about a timeline. Yeah. Wouldn't it be great if there was a timeline on all of these things? And then they were maybe cross-referenced against primary, post-primary, special support services, because people are already saying there's going to be a clash in about 6 years' time of, you know, really heavy duty workload. So I think, you know, there is a responsibility to look at those timelines.
We're supposed to be, as teachers, we're brought up to be, you're trained to be reflective, to stop, to pause, to monitor, evaluate, to see where you are, plan for where you want to go next. We have to have school development plans, a 3-year plan. Surely the EA and the department should be able to draw out a 3-year plan. Our school development plan will have a focus for the year. So, for example, it's literacy. Well, surely, as a big conglomerate, we should be able to do the same thing. Have one focus and work on it, whether it's SEN, whether it's literacy, whether it's numeracy. Just like your school development plan, EA, I think, should have a plan, something similar. Sorry. For some reason.
No, thank you. So, Cathy, you'd indicated next.
Thanks, Chair. I want to say at the start, I think it's class that both panels have been all female as well, and I think the future for trade union movement is bright. Maxine, you mentioned there about the roadmap. I think we're not seeing a roadmap. I don't think it's being hidden from us. I just don't think they have one. I think that's what the issue is, because Pat mentioned there about the allied health professionals. Like, we've been promised figures of how many children are being referred, how many children are getting their statements through, how many children are in pathway 1, 2 and 3. We're still we're waiting and waiting and waiting. The silence is deafening on them. Yeah. And Pauline, you mentioned around that model of having those intervention supports within the school. Like, that's what we were told initially these teams were going to be. Initially they were multidisciplinary teams, which I think everybody thought was fantastic and actually could really, really work. But now we've ended up with this. And again, you mentioned around those professionals within the lit teams. My heart goes out to them, because they are doing a really tough job at the moment, and they're the ones having to go into schools and sort of at the coalface having to handle this. And I know a majority of them who are maybe literacy teachers are answering a helpline phone and not knowing where to send people. But Joanna, wanted to mention, we were both at that meeting that I alluded to, and I think Maxine, it was yourself that said we're all well aware of what the issues are at the start. I don't know about you, Joanne, but I got the feeling at that meeting that DE and EA were coming back as if they were shocked of what they were hearing. And you might have heard me mentioning this earlier as well. What would your view be on
DE and EA actually saying we're not aware of this?
We have been telling them, we meet with them quite regularly, both leading up, like we were meeting with them nearly every other week in relation to the implementations of the local impact teams. And we, as I say, we met with them, we're probably meeting with them monthly at the minute. We've raised these issues with them time and time again, and a bit like we've asked the same thing, where's the roadmap, how are we going to get there? We can't just get to September and be nothing. You know, I've said to them, you should know how many allied health professionals, if you're able to programme in, or you're able to model what it is you're going to need. So all of the issues that we've raised with you today, they have heard. We are raising them with them on every occasion that we've been there, including even the survey results. Like when they're telling us there's been 2,500 positive, mostly positive, you're like thinking, yeah, because none of us can disagree with the questions, the survey questions. In a utopia, that's what we want. But they're not telling us. Again, I'm going back to the roadmap. They're not telling us how we're going to get there and what the provisions they're going to put in place. What they're saying is, all we ever get comes back to, we need to get away from the one-to-one model, and we need to do that. And I'm like, well, we need to be able to say, you can't say to somebody, here's our one-to-one model, and we're moving you to. But they're moving you to nothing because they're not offering them anything at the minute. They're just moving them to, you know, it's not about us being able to offer. And then I think the problem is it's putting the pressure on our principals and our SENCOs that they're going to be the ones who they're going to have to go to the parents and they're going to have to explain. And even when I say this is what we're going to deliver for you, even them trying to get that then off the EA in relation to the provision. Like I you know, Noreen does it day in and day out. Round and round and round, and I know you're hearing this, round and round and round circles for a child whenever all we're saying is, you're telling us you want us to do early intervention, that's no problem, but we need the resources. And then when it comes to getting the resources, they're not getting it. And therein lies our problem. And we're going round and round circles.
And then that, again, when we were told last week that we can't pause this, we can't stop, we can't take a breather here because everything will collapse, and in fact it'll be dangerous.
Can I just say that as well? You know, we were at the consultation for the enhanced support model, and I know I spoke at that as well on that day, and we kept hearing the same message, and they've actually used the terminology, the burning platform. So they're using this as their case for change. So the burning platform, it's a fear-based change management metaphor, basically saying taking the risky leap into the unknown is safer than staying put. You know, now that doesn't really inspire confidence, and it's here. The department, this has been published and this has been circulated with all the SENCOs, and we're told to look at the burning platform. And so the whole case for change is based on this fear management metaphor. You know, and it really does not inspire confidence. I don't think it's good enough to say, okay, we are all acknowledging that things need to change, but we just can't just leap into this. Okay, we do, as Maxine says, we need the roadmap, we need to slow down, we need to embed the current changes that are in place and then work together collectively with health on board to bring us forward.
And that's a key point, Noreen, that you're saying, because I have never heard any professional, any school leader, any teacher saying that they don't want to work together to make this better. There's nobody in here that doesn't want to work together to make it better. And Joanne, like you said, where are the children in this? Where's the children?
Yeah, and you heard EA last week say that they know it's not right, and you heard them stand up and say that they didn't have the personnel, they couldn't offer the services that were needed, etc.
Why push on?
Yeah.
Okay, Kathy, Donna, you'd indicated next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much. And I'll just pick up what you just said there. Why push on? So, if my view on it is, if they were to continue to push on and want all this reform to take place, and ignore all the evidence that's being said in front of them, because you are meeting them, we're saying it. Sometimes when they come in, you think that what they tell us, oh, do you believe that? Like everything's rosy in the gardens and everything's going to be brilliant. What is it they're actually up to? Like, what are they doing? Like, I'm really confused. Is this about saving money down the long run? Is this what this is really up to? Is this reform really about, you know what, we'll take away your legal protections, and then we don't have to worry about it anymore and have to save the couple of pounds?
So when EA say that, you know, 98% of the referrals are picked up and run with, you know, well, I could say that 100% of my referrals to my local yoga class have been made. I haven't been yet, but I have booked on, you know, and I've got booked on 100% of the time. It is all about the perspective. There's no doubt that this can only be about money. If there wasn't a constraint as huge as finance, why on earth would you come up with this? And I have serious issues as well, because the only place that oversight is mentioned in this whole thing is that DE will have oversight, and they will base that on key data from EA. And I would want to say, I have doubts whether that data would be agreed with the profession. I want to know, why is the key data not coming from the schools and the children and the families that these regulations are supposed to be working? Why are they not being asked, do you feel your child's needs are being met, and how they're being met, and do you agree? Why is it DE's oversight of the whole thing based on EA data? Because, I mean, Pat says apparently SENCO workload is reducing, so I wish.
Yeah, I go back to when we really only got back up and running again, and we were really pushing on the issues. And you know, I used to use, and I call it the buzzword now because I was guilty of using it, the early interventions. You know, because that's what families are telling me, we need the early interventions. And we've done joint committees, and we've done all of that. And after one of the meetings, there was actually one of the health side of the house came to me and says, like, why do you really need to know how many allied health professionals are needed? And I sort of knew that day the direction of travel, what we were going to be heading towards. And it's the families I'm working with every day. Like we're talking about May for this to start in September. There's hundreds of kids not even placed this year already, and the ones that were placed last year are on reduced timetables. Nobody's even keeping a record of all of these children. It's fundamental failure. And I get it. We need reform in the right direction. And that's and I said it in the last evidence, but I have been really trying to get up to speed with what's happening across the water, because it does feel like to me that this is a copy and paste, because that's what they're up to as well. And they probably had better outcomes than what we had in the last 10 years, to be brutally honest. But they're going the other way as well. Regression, take away the protections, and then that means we can just leave children at home.
And if you ask anybody, any school leader, would you like more autonomy over how the money's spent and, you know, what you can provide for their children, they're always going to say yes. But, you know, it's like the autonomy in this case is like, you know, having the autonomy to bake a cake whenever you want. But EA are in control of the amount of flour that you get, whether you get eggs or not. And, you know, they're never going to have those things delivered to you whenever you need them. So it is like, it is autonomy without the resources to carry out the things that you're now supposedly responsible for, and that's false. And I just think that school leaders and schools are going to end up spending their times in court trying to defend something that wasn't even their job to provide in the first place.
Is the autonomy a cover for abdication of responsibility and putting it onto us? That's the real fear.
And I think the Children's Law Centre told you that 97% of SEN tribunals are successful.
Yeah.
So that's a key point to listen to, because that's going to be in schools.
Just linking into what you've said about trying to do a copy and paste from across the water, my concern is Northern Ireland has the highest statistics of special educational needs, and it's increasing and increasing and increasing. Surely we should be looking to the root of the problem and trying to find out why is it increasing so much, and then as society trying to deal with that. Like, is research or anything being looked into? Is anything being done to find out why that's happening?
No. Which are still going to be needed no matter what.
Yeah.
That's so we really do need to get the early interventions right. As I say, it's now just become a complete and utter buzzword. And here, the last point I'll say is there any engagement, as a minister even having any engagement here to listen? Because I can envisage what's going to happen in the chamber. I know he's going to go up and say, you're absolutely reckless if you vote this down, you're going to damage children further. I can read the script.
But for the SENCOs, the minister didn't grace us with his presence when we had all the SENCOs together. He zoomed in on a pre-recorded meeting. I get it, he's busy, but that was so important that day. We had all the SENCOs together in that room, and it was very disappointing that the person that's actually leading this and in saying that this is a priority wasn't there to address us in the person.
There's a lot about him.
I was at that event, and it did feel like a misstep that the minister was not there, but he can articulate that for himself. John, you were next.
Yeah, thanks. It was excellent. One observation: every single person that I speak to in the teaching profession says that the reforms by the Minister, of which many I agree with you are good, are rushed. Seems to me working to a political timetable as opposed to because there's an election next year. And I say that as someone who supports some of the stuff he does. One of the issues I tend to find a practical problem with is both senior leadership teams getting ready for these changes, but also in terms of teachers being released for consultations, like the curriculum review, is sometimes the EA say we need you for up to 15 days or something, but there's not fully funded substitute cover. Is that an obstacle to being able to fully engage with those consultations and prepare for change?
Of course. You know, school time budgets in schools, the hours in schools, we already know the additional hours that every teacher and leader, school leader is not as well documented. So, if you're going to try to introduce all these things, you need to train people. You know, if you're going to call people experts, they're going to need trained.
And then when you promise the training, you can't pull it, like what happened to the Senkos.
Correct. Yeah. The second thing I'm very interested in, and I've been raising this, but I've not a lot of receptivity to it. You made the point about understanding why is there this increase. Now, it's not about denying that people have genuine issues like autism, ADHD, and whatever, but there is an increase that is beyond simply that underdiagnosis in the past. And understanding how brains are changing, maybe screens and these other things. I just want to say I agree with you. I think we need to actually be looking at why there was an increase and a change. I wanted to be part of this SEN inquiry, but it wasn't. Is that something you think, just to reinforce the point you made, is that something we're really missing? Understanding this exponential rise?
Specific to Northern Ireland?
Yeah.
Specific to what's happening here and what's affecting education here?
I think it's a culture thing. You know, you were talking previously about mobile phones in schools. You know, it's not all that long ago when people were encouraged to take their mobile device to school, bring your own device to school time, because schools didn't have the equipment to be able to do that. So a lot of our parents at the minute are have children who are starting school now, are part of that. When they were at school, they had to bring their own device to school. So it is a culture sort of thing. But it is also a societal thing where it is instant gratification, you know, everything being very fleeting. There's no long-term thinking about anything. And that's why these regulations are so important, because this is the only opportunity in my lifetime, and probably ours, that there's the possibility of such huge systemic change for the better of all the children in our society. And that's why we want this paused, because we need to be on it like a car bonnet, every aspect of this, and make sure it's doable and workable, because we can't get it wrong again for the kids.
And just to highlight that there's a large percentage of children in Northern Ireland, you know, those underachievers that don't have access to that technology at home. So, you know, schools are the places where they're going to have access to it. And, you know, that's what needs to be driven forward in a really positive, you know, way in education.
I think there's a big difference between really upskilling abilities on tech, which you use in a productive way. I think the big challenge with phones at the minute isn't if it was a brick phone for communication, it's the scrolling constantly, which is damaging attention and the likes and but no, thank you for your
kids are miles ahead of us. We're never ever going to catch up with how the kids are now. I mean, you only had to see the downfall of C2K. I mean, it was a 16-year-old and nobody could work out how he did it. But, you know, there would be a very proud ICT teacher somewhere. You know, but they are streets ahead of us.
And yet we're going to have to harness those abilities in a positive way for future, for cyber security and all those things, which we could be world class in Northern Ireland.
Children in Northern Ireland, you know, a lot of them don't even understand algorithms. You know, a lot of adults don't understand it. So, you know, what they're being fed all the time, they're not even understanding how that's happening. So, you know, we really need to. We've got a time now when we really need to address that.
Let me go on finally, and I'm really intrigued by you saying about understanding why this rise. I'm hearing more and more in early stage of primary school, children being significantly behind milestones. This is increasing. It's not a judgment on parents, but is there a need for more practical support for parenting skills?
Apologies, we need to be just a brief answer from a panel.
There's time in education that is going backwards, so
worrying.
You know, we need to look into that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, John. David, you'd indicated.
Thanks very much, Chair. And again, there's plenty of information I'm sure that will be asked of the DE officials whenever they come before us. I just probably want to turn to the burning platform phrase, and I think we focus probably on the original usage of the term, which related to an atrocity or a disaster. But I mean, burning platform I think has been widely used in public policy, probably most famously in Northern Ireland, relating to the Bingo report around that. And in the health sector, that is somewhere where we have seen changes take place that are probably, in my opinion, positive enough changes, but not in a planned way. They've taken place as a result of collapse, essentially, and therefore having to move very quickly into a different model. Would you not accept then that given the pressures within the system, that there is, to a degree, a burning platform, a level of needing to find a degree of sustainability for all involved? Now, I understand that, and I've heard very clearly the message from both panels that things are moving too fast and they need to slow down, and I'm sure that will be put. I know that will be put to the DE officials when they get here. But is there not, nevertheless, does the burning platform phrase not stand true to some degree in that regard?
It's an unfortunate usage. It's not very. It doesn't inspire a lot of confidence within education. That okay, we need to take this now, because if we don't take it now, well then it's going to be worse staying where we are. There are changes that have happened. Why can't we spend the time now and embed those now, and then look, as Maxine said there, towards this roadmap? We're not saying stop it. None of us are saying stop here. We are saying pause, slow down. We have a real chance to make lasting reform. We just can't jump just because, okay, it is so bad. There are changes that are happening and are happening daily. I mean, you only have to look at the way the new statutory assessment process is now working. There are changes there for good. But we need time. We need time on the ground to become familiar with those changes and to work those out. We need time to get round the new portals and the new referral systems. We need time to utilise our local impact teams effectively. It's all coming too much, too quick, too soon at us. So that's where we're coming from on that.
And can I ask then what we hear an awful lot about slowdown. We've heard an awful lot of detail on other aspects today. When you say slow down, is there specific aspects of that? What does that look? Put some meat on the bones of that for us in terms of what aspects of that do you think are moving too fast and need particularly too slow?
Well, for starters, we've got really to work on managing parental expectation. Our parents now feel that things are going to be different in September time. What effectively is going to be different in September time? As a SENCO, I am still going to have the same level of need in my school. I have a finite amount of resources, I have a finite amount of staff, and I have a finite amount of time to try to meet that need. It's unfortunate that we keep hearing September. This is coming in September. This is everything's going to change in September. When in effect, there's nothing really going to change in September time. So stop using that language the language associated is not helpful. Stop using that and say we're working towards this. That's what we would like to see. A phased approach into this, and we keep getting told well, it is up to individual schools to decide and design their own packages, but we don't have enough evidence yet. We don't have enough examples of how this is actually working.
I have to say, from going into schools myself, I quite genuinely say that, and probably Joanne has said well, of course they would say that, wouldn't they, essentially? But almost every principal, and I've talked to Joanne, I try to get round to absorb as much of that as I can from principals. Nearly all of them that I've talked to about this issue say, I would rather have that autonomy to decide what to do because I can do better things with it than not because they value their classroom assistants greatly, but they sometimes feel that there's no benefit of adding more and more and more to that. And I think it's crude, I haven't dug into it, but I see that Boys Model is in the press today, is doing excellently, even relative to some of the top grammar schools in terms of their performance. And I know that's one of the schools that moved away from the adherence to the one-to-one policy as well. Do you think there is a benefit in that move if done structured?
When it's done structured, but there has to be equity as well, and that's terrific for those schools that they maybe have the resourcing that they can do that. The majority of our schools do not have that level of resourcing, and to look at, we know I need an on-site speech and language therapist in my school. I don't have that. I need that, and how do I then use what I have available to get that for my children? And are we left then the autonomy, and that's what we kept coming back to with Danny there, the autonomy question. There's a fear there that that the responsibility now is all on us, all on the school. Where's the EA in all of this? Is this an abdication of them for their responsibility? And then when things maybe just don't work out the way they are supposed to, then it's on the school, and it's the school that's going to be in the tribunal.
Look here. I would say I think there's plenty that divides us around the table on this and many other issues, but I do think actually the need for health to engage at a better level is something that unites us around the table. I think I'm safe to say. So thank you very much, Chair.
No other indications. Again, as with the last session, we've covered a huge amount of ground there, and I think very clear messages coming through both from last week's evidence sessions and the evidence sessions this week. I appreciate there's probably a huge amount more you would have liked to have had time to say, but we now have to try and unpick all of this with the EA and the departmental officials who are following, so we really do thank you for your evidence and for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, members, just before we might think about a short comfort break, can I check if there are any particular issues for follow-up on the back of that? I imagine largely that will be evidence in relation to the SL1 and to pick up in the next evidence session unless there's anything specific. No? Okay, on that basis, if we could maybe just turn the live feed off, I'm going to suggest we've had two pretty lengthy evidence sessions. We'll have a short comfort break and we'll turn the live feed off.
Committee Room 29, Sound. 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 Committee Room 29.
The live feed back on. Okay, so the live feed is back on. We're back into public session of the committee. With just a comfort break was taken there, so no business was done. The next item in the agenda is item 8. Again, briefing on the SL1 Special Educational Needs SEN Regulations 2026, and it's a briefing from the Department of Education and the Education Authority. Although I suspect some of the broader issues may well be discussed here as well, given the evidence sessions that have preceded this. So refer members to the clerk's note at page 73. We have the department's reply to the raise paper, which is in tabled papers at page 23, and I would like to put my thanks on record for how quickly that response was provided, because that was not a small piece of work, and also the reply from the department on the SEND framework, which is in tabled papers at page 38. So you're all very welcome here today. Introduce, we have Deirdre Ward, Director for SEN Strategic Policy within the Department of Education, Elaine Craig, Director for SEN Statutory and Educational Psychology Service in the Education Authority, Julie McBride, Head of Special Education Review Team in the Department of Education, and Tracy Logan, Interim Head of SEN Statutory Services in the EA. Again, if I've got any job titles wrong, feel free to correct those. So first things first, apologies for the delay. We had evidence sessions which, despite best efforts to keep the time, did run over. I'm not sure if you followed any of the sessions. There was very wide-ranging discussions around a whole range of aspects of SEN reform. So do apologise for the delay and for keeping you waiting. I think I'm just going to hand over at this stage on bearing time in mind for any opening remarks, and I would ask if you could keep them as brief as possible. I think probably that there's an appetite just to get to question and answer at this stage, but I will hand over to you at this point. Okay. Deirdre, I assume to lead.
It's me, thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to attend today along with our colleagues from Education Authority to support the committee with its scrutiny of the SEN regulations to date. The Department recognises the considerable stakeholder interest generated through the consultation process and fully acknowledges the strength of feeling being expressed We're committed to engaging constructively with the committee and with other stakeholders on the issues raised. In this regard, we met with representatives from the Children's Law Centre on the 11th of May to listen and to discuss their concerns. While it wasn't possible to reach consensus on every single issue, the Department hopes that the CLC has a clearer understanding of the rationale underpinning the decisions made. The committee has received joint response from the Department and the Education Authority addressing the 45 questions raised during the briefing provided by the Assembly's Research and Information Service, and we trust this has provided the committee with the assurance that officials have taken a thorough and carefully considered approach to the outworkings and impact of the SEN regulations, including the provision of extensive training and support for schools. While we will endeavour to address as many additional concerns as possible during today's session, if we're unable to provide a full response, we'll follow up with a written response. The Department recognises that the proposed implementation of the SEN regulations has taken place at a time of significant change across the education system, and we're mindful of the challenges this presents for all involved. We are carefully considering the feedback received from key stakeholder groups as we reflect on the most appropriate way forward. We remain firmly committed to the timely implementation of the regulations, ensuring the strengthened support for children and young people with SEN and the new rights for parents and children over compulsory school age are realised without unnecessary delay. At the same time, we will continue to listen carefully to stakeholders as we move forward. That was it. We recognise that the questions would be the important bit. There was a question from committee and through the clerk about doing a comparator between the old regulations and the new regulations. So we have that document now because of changes in formats, and it's a bit messy, but we're very happy to supply that to allow that easier comparison if that's helpful.
A document with track changes?
Yes.
Right. And has the CLC got a copy of that?
I've said that I will. I only did it last night, so I have said that I will share it with CLC. Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, John.
No, that's absolutely fine. No, that's very much appreciated. I think it is important to put on record that there's been a lot of correspondence gone your way on these regs, and that there's been a quick turnaround on that. And I think it's we're keen to work with you in terms of the scrutiny process for these regs. So I suppose we're we've been balancing today in the evidence session between the formal legislative scrutiny around the SEN regulations and then how they connect to the wider SEN reforms. And I think probably members and witnesses, we've all struggled to sort of keep it on a track because everything is so interconnected. And I think we are all really conscious of that, and you can't really separate them out cleanly. If I could maybe just begin by asking probably a broad question to start with. And we've heard some of this in the evidence sessions today, there is maybe a sense of time pressure, September 2026 of these regs being agreed and having gone through all of the processes in the Assembly to have them agreed and on the statute book. There's also a sense in committee that there is a lot of work to do on them. Not because there's anything fundamentally that we're saying there is an issue, but we're really conscious. We're dealing with primary legislation that's 10 years old. We're trying to make sure that we are looking at regs that reflect the intentions of the Assembly at the time, and something that's a 10-year period. We're trying to connect, and also to understand what these regs really mean operationally when they come into force for the system as it is now. So holding those two things in tension is not easy. And I think my sense, and I don't want to speak for the whole committee, but my sense is that it just may take time. On that basis, can you give an assessment if the committee decides it needs to take substantially more time in this, potentially beyond summer recess, which means that the September date is not feasible? What does that mean? And I'm not asking it as a loaded question but really from your perspective, delivering SEN reform. What would that mean in terms of what you're able to do and maybe what you're not able to do?
So, we fully respect the committee's role in this scrutiny process, and yes, it has been too long. 10 years from primary legislation to get to where we are with regulations is too long. I would say as well, we should get into a timetable of doing regulations and primary legislation more often, because it needs to stick and stay pace with what children need and what schools need. So that length of time is not helpful in taking things forward. But having said that, we would be wanting to understand the impact that would have on the new offering that would come through in the regulations, the new mediation service, the challenging timescales that would be in for assessment, the increased use of mediation in terms of appeals on annual assessments. And so we wouldn't want to lose the opportunity to do that, but do we need to proceed with other projects that are already beginning in terms of SEN reform? Then we do, and we will have to keep those ones that are already begun and further work that we have on board moving forward, whether or not the regulations come into play. It would be, we understand the need to take the proper scrutiny, so we would be disappointed a little, but we understand the role.
Well, I want to be clear, and I'm speaking here entirely as a just from my position as a member of the committee. I'm not speaking for the committee, because we haven't reached a firm position on it. But my sense is there's nobody's any interest in being obstructive for obstructive sake. To me, it feels when the question is put on the regs, I think it would be much better if everyone could say yes, rather than like, well, we don't know yet. So and to be kicked again, or it to land on the floor of the assembly to be voted down. So I would be of a mind to try and work through a process where we can get the regs to a point that everybody is comfortable with. But that's it's a big task.
I think we agree with that, because we wouldn't want to go to the assembly with you not being content with what, because what we're proposing.
The same as no point to embarking on that course. Okay. Well, again, conscious of time, and I imagine that other members will probably cover the broader aspects of the evidence that we heard today. So I'll leave that for other members. I just wanted to ask a couple of specific questions on the regs, and again, just to pick up from what you responded with. And I wanted to pick up particularly on the issue of the role of parents in the regulations. And I know there's maybe a question of semantics around whether we call it parental advice or something else. I'm not hung up on the semantics, but what I am concerned about is if the 1996 order does confirm that parents absolutely have a fundamental right for their information to be included in that process, would it be wise to settle some of those concerns around parental involvement in this process and just include that in the regs to make that expressly clear that their views will be sought in every case? Because I think at the minute it sits around they have the right to express their views, but I would like to maybe see something that moves closer to their views will be sought, and then moving on from that, an undertaking in the regs that whatever information and whatever submissions a parent makes, that they will be provided to the organisations providing the formal advice. I'm just not sure what by not including that what you gain in terms of confidence in the system. Whereas I would be pretty clear that across the board in this committee, we're all agreed that the role of parents is absolutely crucial. So is that something you could speak to?
So from our perspective, the change in terms of the terminology around advice is procedural, not substantive, and
not hung up on that.
But we also recognise the anxiety that parents have and others in the ecosystem, and so we absolutely recognise that parental insight is critical to understanding a child's needs. In terms of changing the regulation in the way that you're suggesting, after this session and after further feedback, we absolutely are going to go away and consider everything that we hear and reflect on that and see, what can we address and what is wise to do so, and what scope do we have to do so within the primary legislation to make those changes.
I mean, the primary legislation is extremely clear. The parents' views must be sought. So, and we are 100%, and absolutely that will absolutely happen in every single case. And also in this statement, there is that piece where the parents' information must go in. So I know there's been a bit of a talk on this, but absolutely, yes, we've moved from advice to information, and there's a slight difference between the two sets of regulations. But the primary legislation is the primary legislation. We must seek the views of the parents, and that advice will be taken into consideration 100% and is included in the statement.
Okay, and again, I think, like that, from my discussions with the clerk, I think we're likely to have a session next week among committee to discuss specific regs where we may need to provide feedback, but I mean, I would be content for that to be taken away at this stage. I'll just ask one other thing, and it's probably slightly broader. There's lots of areas where health, are just peppered all the way through this in terms of the need for health to engage. Can I just get a sense from you, and I'm not asking you to have a pop with colleagues in health, and I'm not having a pop. We understand resource pressures, we understand how stretched everything is, but how confident are you in the regs in their current form that health can actually bring to the table what is needed to ensure that there is the relevant cooperation and that the relevant services go into schools when they're needed, that the relevant transition planning happens and it happens in a timely way, all of those areas where health are required, that the relevant advices are provided in a timely way, that we're not routinely putting statements through without health advice when it's clearly needed. I see a real risk in that. So can you give us any sense, any assurance for the committee of how we're going to make sure that education and health are working together as effectively as they possibly can to give these effect?
There is an article, and don't ask me the number of it, because I'll get it wrong, it might be 12, but there is a specific article in the 1996 order that is solely for health and health responsibilities. And that is through the entire SEN process. It's not just statutory assessment or statementing. And again, the regulations and the SEND Act are very clear in terms of their role in transition and in terms of providing support. During this process, we have been consulting and meeting with health about their duties and what they need to provide, so they are fully aware of that. Can I guarantee you 100% that they will be able to deliver that? I can't give you that 100% guarantee, but they are fully...
Could I just ask, in terms of health's duties that sit in the Act, is that framed in a way of insofar as they have resource to do so?
That's the primary legislation. So 1996 order says that. It's not amended by the 2016 Act. So there's nothing that we can do about that. It's in the primary legislation. It says in terms of their resources available.
I'll ask one final question and then I'll hand over to members. I mean, is there a need if we're going to get, but there's been a lot of discussion today about get this right, let's get this right. Do we need to amend primary legislation so that it moves beyond insofar as health has resource, or whatever the phrase is, to actually say you both share duties in this space, thinking of the Children's Services Cooperation Act? And is that something, I don't imagine there's any prospect in this mandate, but is that something that is live and on the table? Because it feels to me that as long as it's down to health saying we don't have the cash, we don't have the staff, it's not going to happen.
Potentially it's something we consider, but I mean, I made the point that we need to be refreshing primary legislation and regulation much more often, because it does need to reflect what's happening in the ecosystem. So potentially it's something to look at for the future. But as to Department of Education and Department of Health working closely, we do. We are meeting very often. We are taking forward work in terms of sustainable nursing support for special schools, starting with the review of nursing that was done in special schools. We are doing other considerable work around data sharing to understand how we can identify children who have needs earlier, maybe from health visitors' views, and how we can get that information sharing piece moving. There is quite a considerable volume of work moving forward in that space. Is it visible yet to committee? Probably not, but it is moving forward. Is it moving forward maybe at the pace that we would all wish it to? Maybe not, but again, that could be a capacity and bandwidth issues on both sides. But colleagues are very committed from Department of Health, HSC and PHA to work with us to see how we can achieve better together.
Can I just maybe add, just on the operational level then, if you're taking it, each of the health trusts have a health SEN coordinator and a data analyst. So our operational teams within our teams are meeting with them on a monthly basis or fortnightly in terms of exceptions, and we're monitoring that all the time, and they're looking at their staff and that as well, in terms of return of advices.
Okay. Well, I think there's probably, in terms of the regs themselves, there's likely to be stuff that will come back formally around that, and I think I have a particular concern around that 14-week time scale for health, and I have real concerns. We will routinely see statements going forward that just then we're building that into the regs that don't have the information that is needed to really reflect the child's needs. That would be a real concern. But we have the primary legislation is what it is. I think I'm going to bring the Deputy Chair in. I imagine he may want to raise the Joint Health and Education Oversight Group, which he was raising at the start of the meeting, because the stats aren't great from what I can understand in terms of how much that is met, but that's a separate question.
That was actually my first question.
Yeah, I'll pass it over to the Deputy Chair.
Are any of you on that Oversight Group?
Yes, I am.
And it's met 6-8 times in 2.5 years.
Well, it's meeting fortnightly at the minute, the Joint Oversight Group, since around Christmas time.
So it's meeting fortnightly since Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I have an answer to a question here from the Minister. Since March 2024, the Joint Health and Education Oversight Group has met on 8 occasions, providing collective oversight, scrutiny and assurance.
It has been meeting, I only joined it.
Going by what you're saying, it should have met more than 8 times.
It has been meeting very frequently since Christmas, and it's doing a number. There are a number of separate groups that are meeting between health and education, as well as the Joint Oversight Group. So there is a data group. There is a group working on the summer schemes piece. There is a group working on the PID and the actions out of the nursing review. So there are quite a number of meetings, and they all feed back into that Joint Oversight Group. There's a meeting next week, for example.
Okay, well, maybe we need to write and ask for more information, because that information from the Minister couldn't be accurate if you're saying the group has met fortnightly. Since when, did you say? Just before Christmas?
Since just about Christmas time. Mm-hmm.
Right, okay. So 4.5 months, that should be, 9 meetings at least. And we're being told 8 meetings since March 2024. There's a bit of a discrepancy
there was one meeting cancelled around Easter time, but that brings it
down to 8 since Christmas.
Yeah.
But we're being told since March 2024. That's over 2 years.
I would have to check that information, because I only came into the department around that time frame, so I'm not aware of that, but I'll check that information.
And the amount of meetings is one thing, the output is another.
Mm-hmm.
And the cupboard seems to be pretty bare when it comes to output from the group. Can you tell me exactly what has been achieved?
So there are some actions to be taken forward in relation to the review of nursing in special schools.
Can I just stop you there?
Yeah.
So first of all, tell us what has been achieved, and then we can talk about what actions are being taken forward.
Well, the project document to take forward all of the actions out of that review has been agreed, and the work streams have been assigned. And then there has been work around data and how we share and handle data being taken forward by statisticians on both sides, and that is reporting next week with a presentation. So we'll see what that takes us to, and then there has been joint work in relation to summer schemes.
I suppose the question is, this group has been operational since March 2024, according to the Minister. I'm just going by what he's saying.
Yeah.
What has it actually done in over 2 years? What can you point to as the achievements, not actions that are in progress or meetings that are going to take place or actions or anything like that? What actually has been achieved? So, for example, there needed to be massive publicity around the summer scheme for special schools before the two ministers even lifted the phone to each other. Well, was the group not working on that beforehand?
Well, there was some information sharing before the ministers engaged, but
you see, I apologise for stopping you here.
Sure.
But you're using jargon here with me. There was some information sharing. I'm asking you, what has this group actually done?
Summer schemes
what can you point to as your achievements?
Well, summer schemes will run this year, and that is because of the work that has been done between the two groups.
Let me stop you there. Yeah. That has nothing to do with work that was done by that group. That came about as a result of the publicity, the recall of the Assembly, and the anger of parents and families as a result of those summer schemes being cancelled. It has nothing to do with the group that you're part of.
Well, I would say that part of that work is that there will be nursing support in support of the summer scheme delivery, so that we can ensure the safety of all the children who attend.
Okay, fair enough. I just want to move on to a more general question about the SEN regs. So I've said this publicly before. If ever I get an issue in the constituency around children with SEN that I can't deal with myself, that the EA won't deal with, or the department won't deal with, my go-to organisation is the Children's Law Centre, and specifically Rachel Hogan, if I can get the hold of her. She's not just a person with expertise, she's also a person with great passion and compassion for the clients that she deals with. She's a person, in my view, of the highest integrity. So when the Children's Law Centre come in here and tell us that they see problems with the regs, they see unintended consequences, and potentially some of the regulations being unlawful.
The question there,
so why should I listen to the department or the EA over and above? Because, I mean, I can tell you now, we listen to officials coming in here, not just this committee, but other committees I have been on. They come in, they mislead committees, they tell lies to committees, they gaslight us, and I understand officials are here at the direction of the minister, and are going to follow the direction that the minister has given. But why should I or anybody here listen to officials rather than the Children's Law Centre with the excellent reputation that it has?
We'll have to ask for as brief a response as possible, but obviously
I think it's very helpful to get the input of the expertise from the Children's Law Centre, and that's why we met them and sat with them for quite a number of hours and worked through many of the concerns that they had raised in the letter that they had written, and also in advance of them attending committee. They had been briefed for quite a long period of time in terms of the regulations, and there are some points where we don't meet consensus view, but it doesn't mean that we are not respectfully listening. We had some legal advice on some of the points that they were, unhappy with, but we do work well with the Children's Law Centre, and we very much respect their opinion, and we seek advice and engagement with them.
Are you happy to take their advice that this process should be paused for greater scrutiny to take place?
That's for the committee to make a decision on.
Well, what's your view on it?
I've said already, my view is we would be disappointed if the regulations can't go forward, but it's the committee's role to make the decision.
Thank you. I have to move on to the next member, as Stanley has indicated.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you. And just following on from Pat, it was very clear from Children's Law Centre last Wednesday, and you met them last Monday, but they want to pause, but we also heard that from the evidence we got today. I know you didn't hear that, and I suspect you watched back the committee of last week, and which went into great detail. So I can't see it going any other way here than the recommendation may come from this committee that it has to be paused. But a part of the pausing of it needs to be that re-engaging and working with the Children's Law Centre for them to come forward and give us a reassurances then that they're happy enough for it to go forward, because they also did point out that some of the changes have actually happened through the back door. These are pushed on ahead, where that's the minister's responsibility, or the departments of the EA. There has been changes that have been made that probably shouldn't be being made because the regs haven't been scrutinised. So what's your view on that?
You're talking about the code of practice and the 3 stages of the code of practice. And I think Rachel did mention last week that it is complicated in terms of the draft code, which is the current code, which is 5 stages, and now the draft code is 3 stages. And I know that Rachel may disagree with this, but the support that is provided under the current code is termed continuum of Provision, thank you for that. And under the new code, it's the graduated response framework. It is the same thing, but the graduated response framework provides so much more information for schools on how they implement that support, and also then for others on how the support is provided. I don't agree that we're bringing it through the back door. I think what we're trying to do is provide schools with the guidance and advice that they have asked for.
We've only seen the code of practice, and the SEN regs haven't been scrutinised or cleared. So, okay. So in the evidence that we've heard, and some of the questions we did, particularly today, so there is a perception going out there, and I'm going to be honest, I lost trust in this particular minister a very long time ago. I listen to the parents that come through my constituency office, and I have a lot of compassion, and I really do my best to represent them the best way that I possibly can. There is a real fear, and I've been trying to educate myself also with what's going on across the water as well. And it has been flagged by the Children's Law Centre. It has been flagged again today that legal protections could be lost for children who have complex and need that support, right? So that needs to be addressed. If legal protections are going to be removed for children with additional needs and complex needs, that's really serious, because that is actually what's going on across the waterway. They may deny that as well. That's certainly what the indications are coming through from groups that are advocating across the water, and that is a fear that I have as well. If you strip away a child's right, then the support doesn't be there. They're left their rat at home, and ultimately you save money in the long run. So that's where the mistrust and all is growing. So I think you really need to re-engage with the likes of the Children's Law Centre, with the unions, because I'm going to be honest, if we can't get a green light from them, there's absolutely no way you're going to have MLAs walking through the chamber to support this here. And you do need to have the support of the MLAs here to push forward with their proposed changes, because no one's arguing that reform isn't needed. The problem is the reform must be progressive to support families and not regressive, because we're seeing that across the water. It's very regressive.
100% agree with you. But I'm not sure when you say that we're removing legal protections, I don't understand what that actually means. Sorry.
The Children's Law Centre and the unions flagged that up, the potential that there could be unlawful consequences with the SEN regs and the code of practice. So there could, and the fact that there's just, the responsibility falls more on the schools than it does within the Education Authority. They have flagged it up. I'm going to be honest, I have no legal background whatsoever, but I'm going to be taking the word of the Children's Law Centre and working alongside them. That's who I'm going to be guided by, and if they are not comfortable going forward after they've re-engaged with you, because I really hope that you are up for the pause.
Absolutely. Yeah, we are. Yeah. We have given CLC that commitment, absolutely.
And that's what I want to hear when they come back in again, that improvements are there and that they're confident, because then I can be confident when I'm representing my constituents who elect me to be here to be their voice.
I think we need to understand a bit more from CLC in terms of exactly what they mean by legal protections. I don't know whether the
unions also say that they're fearful, and the school leaders are very fearful, that more of the onus is being put on schools rather than those within the Education Authority.
Okay.
And it could be them dragged through the courts.
Okay.
Well, that to close. Next member is indicated is Michelle.
Thanks, folks. I'm going to start with a question on the regs. So, again, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, because like Danny, I'm not a lawyer either. My understanding is if you don't get the health input by those 14-week time frame, then you proceed with the statement anyway. I'm just raising a concern then that the quality of the provision and the interventions for a child in that context won't be adequate, or certainly wouldn't be as effective as if they did have the health interventions represented.
I'll maybe just come in on that, if that's okay. I mean, I think you'd have to, Michelle, put it in context. I mean, about the question about whether or not we are not receiving medical advice at this minute in time. And we are receiving medical advice routinely for every statutory assessment that we're carrying out, or we're getting an indication from health as to what we can expect. The number of statements that we have ever had to issue without medical advice are very, very, very small. It's a minimal number, and actually if they do then come in, the statement can be amended. There is no particular difficulty with that. I suppose for me, this is closing it off. The concerns would have been for a number of years about the number of statements that go by the 26-week period for issuing a final statement, and a lot of that would have been where there was no upper time frame and to actually close off that decision making period. So this is actually bringing that bit, and and we're working with health on as I said earlier on, with the health SEN coordinators in terms of the requesting and the receipt of that advice, and bringing those in within their timescales, and looking at those on a regular basis as to identifying where the difficulties are. I don't see that as a big issue because it's not something that is currently an issue, and I'm not saying how then we would make the assumption that it's going to be a bigger issue because we're closing it off and at an upper time scale with it.
I think I was inferring that it would make it a bigger issue. It was more just, I think as I've been looking through this, I've been looking at it, I guess, from the perspective of the child. And are the children getting what they need from their statement, from the interventions, from these regulations? Are they delivering for the child? So it just occurred to me that for kids who are perhaps not getting an intervention from health on their statement, that theirs won't be as effective as it would be otherwise. But I don't want to label it if you're saying it's not an issue.
Just to make sure, just so that we're off the, because by delaying getting the statement, we are delaying then other types of support that might be available there. I take on board what you're saying about the health advice, but that can come subsequently. But to not have an upper time frame and not have a statement at all, then that means none of the other supports are there. So actually it's better to be getting something and moving it forward and reviewing that then if that's the way forward.
And I think that's the point you're making generally about the concerns around the 14 weeks, that everything pushes to the 14 weeks, but you're saying right now that draws a line in the sand which isn't there right now, so that will be more protection for the child in terms of getting a statement at all. Yeah. Are you monitoring those numbers right now, and then we'll be able to see the difference then?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a regular. They have their data analysts within health as well. So each of the health trusts. So we've a fortnightly meeting with them, with our office managers and the health trust for that.
Okay, just to go back to the previous briefing then that we just had, I'd like to raise some of the points that were raised with us that I think it was an excellent evidence session and more than informed in terms of the perspective they were putting to us. There was a proposal in terms of a way forward. The suggestion was that we pause the wider changes, that we embed the changes that have already been made, we develop a roadmap, and we ensure health are involved and work together to deliver. That sounds to me like a very controlled and manageable way in terms for going forward in terms of these reforms, whereas what we're hearing at the minute, it all seems overwhelming and chaotic. Is that something you have or would consider in terms of a different way forward? So again, reiterating what everybody has said, no one says no reform, no one said don't do it, but the evidence is really compelling right now that the pace and the volume of change in the school system, full stop, not just in saying, is overwhelming and counterproductive. So would you or have you looked at any of these kind of approaches, especially in the particular that development of the roadmap?
The implementation of SEN reform is phased, and we can that's within our gift to look at that phasing and to do it in a way that is acceptable within the education ecosystem, because we will listen to stakeholders. The consultation, for example, on the enhanced support model is still live until the 22nd, I think. So there's over 2,000 responses back on that already, is my understanding. So all of that needs to be looked at so that we can go, we have listened and here is our response to that. Absolutely, we'll have to very much roadmap and phased implementation for me sound similar. So for us, it is about what does that phasing look like, and is that in a way that stakeholders are content with?
So Deirdre, you've also mentioned there the consultation and the responses you've had to date. There has been criticism as well about the consultation, that it's leading, that you will then use the weight of those responses to push forward these reforms and not take the pause and not reflect on the evidence that people are giving us who have responded to it, but who feel their ability to respond to it has been curtailed by the nature of the consultation. How would you respond to that?
I could just ask for a brief response on
that. I mean, the consultation is still live, so there are still responses coming in, and it is within EA's gift to manage that consultation responses, but we will be working really closely with them to look and see what does that mean. Let's just remember that there are about 150 schools doing alternate models of support, enhanced support models already. Our intention is to work with those schools starting in September and move that forward, not to be necessarily adding lots more schools to that if that's not the space that they are in. Although colleagues from EA would say they are out visiting schools every day, and there are schools who are saying they are excited to look at offering different ways of supporting children within their environment. So it'll have to be alongside what schools feel is reasonable, is justified, and in a phased way. Will we pause and take a look at all those consultation responses? Absolutely. And it would be right and proper to bring those consultation responses to this committee.
Yeah, I would urge you to listen to that other session. It was very good in terms of just the concern around even that kind of schools are using this model now. There's a concern about things being pushed onto the schools in terms of the responsibility that otherwise would be with the EA. But I'm sure that will all come through in the consultation. But I think it's really important that that is understood in terms of what those schools, their feedback has been.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. David, you'd indicated next.
Thanks very much, Chair. I guess it's been brought up by two other members just to get clarity on it from your end. The Children's Law Centre last week said that they believed that some of this was unlawfully delegating powers to schools that rightfully belong with the EA. Are you satisfied you said you'd taken your own legal advice and there are still some areas where there are disagreements between you. Are you satisfied that that is not the case?
I am satisfied that that is not the case. In the regulations seek to clarify the roles and responsibilities of EA and of boards of governance, for example, and to make that a lot clearer what those roles and responsibilities are.
So the primary legislation is very clear. The duties are on the EA, so the primary legislation is very clear in that aspect.
No, thank you very much for that. In terms of just what you were talking about there, in terms of schools that are already using essentially the enhanced support model, positive feedback, I have said a couple of times now, and that is my experience of going into schools in my constituency, where those that have it welcome it, and those that haven't yet would welcome it. In that regard, is there a way that we are seeking to get feedback from those that are already using that system? Because I think it's important that we hear those voices. We naturally have, ununderstandably from parents, from other political parties, have had concerns particularly around one-to-one and what that means, and we know why people hold that dear and are unsure of the future around that. I think it's important we probably hear from some of those schools. Talked about Boys Model earlier on, clearly performing well. How can we hear more from those schools around their experiences, both positive and negative, to improve the process going forward?
So, do you want me to answer that? Mm-hmm. So we did have some of those schools at the conference that I think all of committee were invited to. So they were able to say the difference that it made, and more importantly than the schools, we had the parents of the children who had been involved, who were rightly sceptical at the start of the process, and then were able to see the difference in their own children's lives, which was that's the most incredible voice actually that we need to listen to, and that's the only way I think that we can encourage this, is by ensuring that this is evidence based. And if we have that evidence base and we have parents and principals leaning into other principals, then that's where this will change. That has also been part of the whole consultation process. So at every consultation event, the implementation of this has been raised and been highlighted with principals, classroom assistants, really crucially classroom assistants who, in my view, and any of the consultation events that I've been at, are well up for change and want this to be in place and want a secure working environment for themselves, and rightly so. And then also parents who've come along to the consultation events as well. On the EA website, alongside all of the consultation documents, there's also what's the word I'm looking for? Case studies, yes. So they're all available as well from both primary and post-primary sectors.
Thank you very much. Next point, I probably should have written more information as I was listening to it. The representative from one of the trade unions, who was a SENCO, said that she had attended 2 days training, which was excellent, and she spoke highly of it, but was then disappointed that a day where, am I right in saying she was going to use that to train other staff on those things, was then withdrawn? How can we reassure those that are speaking highly of the training that's given that those days will not be withdrawn at short notice?
Okay. So that will be the central implementation team who were providing day 3 of the graduated response, and the hope had been at that stage that we would have SENCOs out to that and they would get a day sub-cover back in school. We've only got the funding up until the end of June, so we have given the assurance then that once we get that, beyond that, if there's money in there, that we will do that at that stage. But it's just that there's a limited pot there at the moment, and we thought it more important to get as many SENCOs out as possible and get them at least the first day of training, and because that's really all around how to make a request for statutory assessment and the evidence required around that, because that's what the SENCOs had asked us to do for them. So once we
appreciate that, and I think we all appreciate the pressures that the department is under financially, looking into the £600 million deficit next year. But how confident are you that you'll be able to deliver that?
Well, that will be that.
It's totally dependent on the agreement of the budget for the full financial year. We got permission for 3 months. You know, we need the executive colleagues to agree on a budget for the year.
Heard loud and clear. Any time left, Chair?
We are.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Cheers, Chair. Thank you, David. Kathy, you'd indicated this.
Sure. Just to go back on that point, and you've explained the rationale as to why, and you've said that it's down to budgetary constraints, but can you understand that this, for those SENCOs, is another, for the want of a better word, digging the teeth and going, there you go, you can have it, and then actually no, we're taking it away from you. And that was something positive that they were going to. Can you understand how that's just another example of the mistrust that there is out there?
I fully understand that, and I mean we have communicated that to them at training, because I mean the initial indication was when we went out that there would be the day's training and then a day's sub-cover back in school. We had to prioritise in terms of the funding that we were given as to who were. I know, but
I understand that, but they're prioritising their time as well.
Then the work that they were given to do, Kathy, and what they're being able to prepare for, that wouldn't have been probably disseminated out until September time anyway, because what we do on the back of that is do a school development day. No, we do a school development day pack for them for their end of August, for their Baker days at that stage, and they will if the money comes through, I understand. But
Tracy,
if I don't have the money, I can't give it to them.
Sorry,
I can't. I wasn't finished talking, so I didn't hear your question.
A SENCO's workload is what a SENCO's workload is, and they're prioritising to go away for that day to then bring it back. It's just another example of the mistrust that they have. They see it being given and taken away. But I want to move on to other issues. We were at a meeting last week, Julie and Deirdre, you were both in attendance from it, and I know that it wasn't an official consultation as such, but there was an awful lot of feedback that day. What was your takeaway from that day? What was your takeaway from the teachers, the SENCOs, classroom assistants, everybody that was there?
There was an awful lot of anxiety, I would say, in the room. There were people who are nervous about what the changes are. We were listening to that. We absolutely want to sit down. It's been a crazy week, so we absolutely do want to sit down and go through all of what we heard that day. We were taking some notes, and I have committed to engage with some of the people I spoke to after the event, to go and hear more from them in more detail about some of the challenges that they raised that day. So that was the start of that conversation for us, and we want that conversation to continue. But yes, we've very much heard the level of I would say anxiety in terms of changes coming forward and challenges that people are facing right now today.
So I would say a lot of it was a lot of frustration as well in the room too. And I understand you're saying that you'll take that away and there's a lot of things that you've heard. I think a lot of the frustration that I heard afterwards when they were contacting me as well was, this is not the first time they've said this. They have said this over and over and over and over again to DEA, and like I said on the day as well, this is not a slight on you guys, this is on the system that's in place. They're sick to the back teeth of repeating it and saying all of these things in different forums, and they're afraid of this is just being built on through. No matter what we say here, it's just going to be done. All these issues that we're raising are not going to be fixed. Michelle mentioned there about the consultations, and like one example was career progression on it, and you have to take if you agree with career progression. Of course they're going to say they agree with career progression, and this is one of the issues that they have, but there's no detail on it. They have no idea what that actually means. So their fear is coming back from these consultations, everything's going to be wonderful and everybody out there is going to agree with everything, but those granular details, like you guys heard that day, are the bits that are instilling a lot of fear, a lot of mistrust, and going, where is this going? Because they don't see a roadmap. So how is there going to be any change?
And I totally get your point. Of course, they'll take that they want career progression. But I suppose what I can say is that, you know, some of you will have heard from the, I'm going to get this wrong now, Ulster University, you know, and Professor O'Connor Bones, she did the report 2 years ago now on the profile of classroom assistants. We have commissioned her to take that forward. That is looking at the career progression of classroom assistants, the terms, conditions, the job descriptions, the pay that goes with it. So that is a piece of work that we have commissioned and are taking forward in conjunction, you know, in partnership with the EA. It's not going to be a quick fix, but we are absolutely passionate about making sure that classroom assistants are acknowledged for the excellent work that they do and paid appropriately, and have those permanent contracts for those that want them. So that is something we're taking forward.
And have a way to progress as far as they would like to take it to. So, you know, we're very clear that that's what we, you know, Conor Bones will be reaching out to all schools in the next week or so
to hopefully then, because we have actually had through the consultations on the enhanced support model, we've been saying this is a piece of work we're doing for classroom assistants. If you want to get involved, contact us. So we've had actually quite a few emails coming in. We'll pass those on, but I'm hoping in the next week or two there will be a letter goes out to schools saying, you know, we want to talk to the principals, classroom assistants, SENCOs. If you want to get in touch, let us know, and hopefully that engagement will commence September, you know, October.
And I hope that you,
final
from
point,
that day, you kind of got that feel from, like, you're going to reach out to the schools, that those principals are just going to go, there's another email that I have to respond to, there's another thing that I have to do, another bit of the workload puzzle that there is at the minute. And a lot of them are saying they don't even have time to read them, never mind put in the right information. How is this, I don't see how we move forward without pausing this. And there was a member from the EA there last week that basically said, no, it won't be paused. And kind of a threat made that, well, if we pause it, it's all going to collapse.
I think we have to just look at the consultation responses and see what they say and make a decision, and then, you know, we'll see what happens.
I think I've said a number of times, I think close of a consultation is an appropriate time for everybody to pause, and I think that's what you would expect at the end of a consultation, so that the system seems to feel the need for that very, very strongly. So I think it's going through clearly, and let's take the time that is needed. Don't have any other indications at the moment, so I think in terms of where we go from here, there may be specific issues on the back of all of our evidence sessions that we want to take forward today. I think probably on the back of our meeting next week, there's likely to be more specific queries around getting into the detail. Okay, these are the regs that maybe are causing problems, or that need a bit more attention, or that we need some more further assurances on. So I think that's likely to be the shape of the process from here. But look, thank you for your time, and no doubt we'll be hearing from you again soon. And we are conscious of probably the sense of overwhelm everybody is feeling in the system right now across the board. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, members. So there is. There's obviously a mix of things here. There are the wider system issues around SEN reform, and there are the specific issues around the SEN regs. Can I just seek agreement from members that we're content to pick up any specific further scrutiny points, and I think we'd be moving into sort of those specific areas on the regs that we actually are seeking the department to potentially revise, or to come back to us if there is any scope for revisions, or any of those areas where we're concerned around the connection between the primary legislation and these regs. Are we content to pick that up next week, and for members to maybe come with specifics on that? Agreed on that? Anything at all we've heard a lot of evidence today in terms of any follow-up that we'd want to take forward at this stage in any of those items? Nothing at this stage. Okay, so that then closes.
On the issue of this Oversight Committee, I mean, there's clear discrepancy between the evidence we heard today and the two letters that I received from the Minister, and I wonder, Well, first of all, would it be possible to get the minutes of any meetings that have taken place?
Certainly imagine we can ask that. Now I think just through the clerk's team, it has been brought to my attention we did write around that oversight body last week, so I'm just put maybe more clarity on what we asked for, because if there's, so I mean again I'm sure that can be added to that request then to seek those minutes. So,
maybe they only start a meeting in Christmas.
I mean, I think it occurred. I think it occurred to a number of us. But perhaps the figures are right, but they hadn't met before Christmas. So we will see. We'll see what comes back. So, okay, members. So look, a huge amount of ground covered there. I think members can take the time between now and next week to reflect again if there are other issues, because there is such a clear theme coming through around just that tension between the desire and appetite for reform and the sense of being overwhelmed with the pace of change. So I think we're all very mindful of that. Okay, next item in the agenda is the General Teaching Council Bill. I'm just going to move to a different brief. I think there have been some changes. So that is item 9 of the agenda, and I would refer members to the draft report for the GTC Bill committee for the committee report, and we're going to consider that now. That's at page 40 of tabled papers. So I would just remind members that the committee stage is about to conclude. The committee's report needs to be agreed today. So I would need to check, and I'm looking at the time. I think I'm fairly confident what the answer to this would be if members require a reading period to peruse any aspects of the report before we go ahead to agree content. Not hearing any indications on that basis. So if at any point, if there is anything arises that any member feels we need to go into closed session to discuss anything in any further detail, then please do indicate. I'll move through this now, and it will be largely paragraph by paragraph where possible. So is this as per the brief in terms of what I'll be working through?
Yeah, I mean paragraph by paragraph, I think for the executive summary, the background, the committee approach and consideration, and that takes us from paragraph 1 up to 58. Then there's a very detailed section which summarises all of the issues that the committee has been discussing along the line. So that can be agreed by section, and that's paragraphs 59 to 225. And then you just want to review your decision making of last week, which was the actual decisions on each clause, and that's just the very end of the report. So if the committee is happy today to agree, then it'll be ordered to print. The order to print date will be today's date, and then once we get our Hansard, all of those papers will go up on the website.
Okay, that's great, thank you. And just to check from my understanding in terms of what you've highlighted there, if working through the briefing will take us through that in the sequence you've outlined there, have I understood that correctly?
I think we were kind of hoping to do it section by section, but we've had a check back with guidance, and it is paragraph by paragraph for the most part.
So I should be referring to these notes then? Thank you. Okay, so and you keep me right here as just to make sure I do cover this correctly, as we're working up maybe slightly different structure than I anticipated. So the first section we need to look at then is the executive summary, which is paragraphs 1 to 8, and don't have page numbers for that, but are members content with paragraphs 1 to 8 of the report as drafted? Agreed. We then move on to the section the background on the report, and that's at paragraphs 9 to 32. Again, just checking if I have page numbers. Yeah, page 48 of tabled papers. Are members content with
page 9 of the report?
And page 9 of the report. Okay, and that's paragraphs 9 to 32. Are we content with those paragraphs as drafted?
Take a minute and just make sure that you're happy.
Are we content? Members agreed?
Agreed.
Then we are at committee approach, and that is at paragraphs 33 to 43, I think that is, of the report, and that is at page 53 of your table papers. So are members content with each paragraph of that section as drafted?
That's just the chronology.
Agreed. Okay, and then we move to the consideration of the bill, and that is paragraphs 44 to 58 of the report, and that is commences at page 55 of tabled papers. Are members content with those paragraphs as drafted? Great. And then we're taking
the next bit
as a section. So the clause by clause detail, and that's paragraphs 59 to 225. So our members agreed that are content with that section of the report as drafted. Agreed. And then we move to clause by clause decisions in the report, and just to check, I can take these as a block, just the paragraphs as listed here.
Yeah, members will just want to recall last week, I mean, there only was a bit of nuance around clause 1 where the deputy chairperson advised members that he was bringing forward an amendment, and the chairperson advised that he was content with clause 1 at this time, but that was without prejudice to developments later on at consideration stage. And other than that, the committee did agree to each clause of the bill. Okay. So are you all happy with that record?
Yeah. Okay. And that amendment has been tabled, just for the record.
Yeah. So to confirm, and that's at paragraphs 226 to 229, and then the decisions, which is 1 to 16. This is
just the clauses.
The clauses on clauses 1 to 16 and the long title. Yeah. So are members content with that section on committee decisions as drafted? Great. And then are members content with the appendices as currently drafted in the report, and that's appendices 1 to 7, and that begins at page 95 of tabled papers. Are members agreed? Great. So as we have agreement on all of that, can I get agreement on a couple of other items, which first of all to order the report of the General Teaching Council Bill to be printed? Are we agreed? And then can I also seek agreement for a copy of the minutes of today's meeting to be included in the report? Are we agreed? Can I also seek agreement that an electronic copy of the bill report be published on the committee's webpage and sent to all organisations that provided evidence to the committee on the bill? Agreed. So on that basis then, I can advise members that this concludes the committee stage of the General Teaching Council Bill. Okay, thank you. So item 10 then on the agenda is correspondence, and I would refer members to pages 90 to 308 where a number of items are provided under correspondence, and then we have the summary note which is at page 88 of your packs. I think unfortunately there's quite a few things in here that do require committee consideration, but we'll move through them as quickly as we can. Item 10.3, page 142, it's a response from the Department of Education on the tax-free childcare eligibility, including correspondence to and from the Finance Minister. I would certainly want to propose that we share that with the correspondents who had expressed an interest, but also happen to open up to other members to express any views on that, as I know we'd had a fair bit of committee discussion. You can see Michelle has indicated there.
Langman?
Yes.
Yeah, all right. No, it was just in particular the wear and tear allowance that the Finance Minister had expressed the need for an impact assessment that he was requesting from Education. So just to find out if that has happened, if we can see that impact assessment as well.
Are we content that that correspondence goes to the department to establish that? Great. Okay, item 10.4 on page 151 is a response from the Department of Education on the RE syllabus, and I would be proposed to note, because my understanding is that the information that was sought at that stage from committee was essentially whether or not there would be a public consultation on that. So if we're content to note on that basis. Yeah, okay. So that then takes us on to the next item of correspondence, which is item 10.5, and that's page 153. It's correspondence from the Department of Education providing a breakdown of budgets and costs for current transformation projects within the SEN review. I would be proposing that we note but keep those projects under close review as we go forward. Are we agreed? Item 10.6, page 156, is a reply from the Department of Education and Outdoor Learning in schools and confirms there are no plans to develop a strategy for outdoor learning, but that it will be included in the review of the Northern Ireland curriculum. I would propose that we note we did have our committee motion on this, which did achieve cross-party support, so it is disappointing from my perspective that no strategy is being progressed, and I'm again slight concern with pushing this all to the curriculum review as outdoor education is, in my view, an approach, not a subject. But other than that, unless there are other views proposed to note.
Good.
Item 10.7, page 158, that's a reply from the Education Minister regarding the SEN Summer Scheme cancellations. I'm going to propose we note, as we covered that specific issue earlier in the meeting. We agreed? Good. Item 10.8, page 159, it's a reply from the Education Authority regarding the recent cyber attack on Education Authority records, including a timeline of engagement with the ICO. And I would also just highlight that this matter is subject to an ongoing PSNI investigation, so we should just be mindful of any comments. I'm happy to seek members' views, but I would want to propose that we do write to the department to scope out where investment in a new IT platform for schools currently sits and whether that is going to be provided in light of some of the concerns highlighted in that correspondence, if we're agreed. Right. Item 10.9, page 165, it's a reply from the Minister of Health regarding the Emotional Health and Wellbeing Framework, and then also item 10.13, page 243, correspondence from the Department of Education on the framework as well. Again, can seek members' views. My assessment of that would be as two poor responses. Essentially, it seems to be that we're being advised that the Emotional Health and Wellbeing Framework, RISE, and various whole school approaches, which are absolutely, fine in their own right, is all that we have on offer. I think the committee interest, as far as I can tell, was clear. We have a commissioned counselling service for post-primary, but nothing at primary, no replacement, no seeming planning for a replacement of Healthy Happy Minds. And I think it seems to me that all of this is falling to schools who have to find it from their own budgets, and to me, children are potentially losing out based on the budgetary position of the primary school they happen to attend, and I don't think that's acceptable. So I think there really is a clear question. Are the two departments actively engaged in scoping the need for a potential model for counselling intervention as a follow-on from Healthy Happy Minds? I don't think we can frame the question any more clearly. We've tried, we haven't had very much back. Are we agreed that that is the question committee was trying to establish an answer to? You agreed?
I would just caveat that Healthy Happy Minds was done, as we know, with additional funds, and we're now in a situation where the department is facing the £600 million financial pressures that it is. So I think it's not an indication of whether people care about this issue or not. It's more a case of whether the department has resources to do everything it would like to do.
Without a doubt, resources are relevant. I suppose my response to that, David, would be that we did hear in the two evidence sessions we heard that there seemed to be in the evidence session, apologies, we heard from the department, there did seem to be an acceptance that there needed to be a look at what was required, what was the need, and what was the, to scope that. And then we've had written responses back saying, well, we need to scope it, and that's not happening. And I think that is the concern. Resource maybe comes out.
I think everybody spoke highly of Healthy Happy Minds as well. I think I don't disagree with that. I think it is a large part of where we are, and I know all departments are facing it, but it's
accept it. Danny.
Yeah, I just want to make the point on that when it comes to resources. Ministers have budgets and priorities. You just can't keep letting them off the hook by saying, oh, his budget that could be 600 million or whatever it is. Just last week we're hearing announcements of nearly £11 million for AI. Without getting into a debate of it, it's still money that is there for a priority. I could say that about Transform Aid, I could say that about the mobile phone purchase. I'm just making that point. They have got priorities.
Story yesterday, 90 grand for an app that doesn't get used.
900,000. Not
900,000?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You were being kind. Yeah, you were being kind, Deputy Chair. Okay, well, I think there's obviously differences of emphasis around budget and where the maybe priorities should be, but do we have agreement to try and get clarity on what is the active engagement between the two departments on a successor to Healthy Happy Minds? Great. Item 10.10, page 167, response from GTCNI regarding the induction period for fully qualified teachers. It's a fairly comprehensive response, so I propose we note. Agreed. Item 10.11, page 169, it's an invite from the British Society for Allergy and Clinical Immunology, the launch of the National Allergy Strategy scheduled for Monday the 1st here in Parliament Buildings. Are we content to note for diaries? Content. Item 10.14, page 244, is correspondence from the Northern Ireland Schools and Colleges Careers Association regarding the development of a careers curriculum. So I would remind members that we have our concurrent meeting with the Committee for Economy scheduled in the forward work plan, and we can certainly raise those issues at that. I think it may well be a good idea for members to consider raising the issues, and then we can scope out whether a briefing is required on the back of that evidence. And I would also suggest we may want to share that correspondence with the Economy Committee, as it is relevant to their work, if we're agreed.
Agreed.
Item 10.15, page 250, it's correspondence from Angel Eyes NI in relation to the draft SEN regulations. I've declared an interest in that earlier in the meeting, but I would want to propose that, as well as being added to the evidence for the scrutiny of regulations, I think that should be shared directly with the department for specific responses to their queries, as I think issues relating to children with a visual impairment and more broadly sensory impairments often don't get a lot of attention because they are often low incidence conditions, but we would want to make sure that these regulations do reflect the needs of those children, if members are agreed. Item 10.16, page 252 and page 100 of tabled papers are items of correspondence from an individual regarding post-primary placements. And I think, look, it really sets out, I have to say, quite a distressing scenario of a parent who's clearly at their wit's end in relation to trying to establish an appropriate placement for their child. So I would want to suggest that we do share those specific questions with the EA and request their response. They are asking a lot of questions about what support is provided for parents in that interim period between no placement being found and securing one, but I also think it would be appropriate to ask the EA to engage directly with that parent, because they seem to be unable to establish that engagement, if members are agreed. Agreed. And then we have item 10.19, page 291. It's a request from Book Trust NI to meet with the committee regarding the early learning and childcare strategy. I think they make a good case as to why their evidence would be relevant to the committee, and I think, again, clear we don't have any capacity between now and summer recess, but I would like to seek members' agreement to potentially schedule a meeting for after recess on that. Agreed. Item 10.21, page 294 is a reply from the Department of Education regarding the allocation of SEN places for 2026 to 27. Happy to open up for members' views. I feel we are going round in circles a little bit in this with the Minister's engagement on this issue, as I think the committee's interest was really that accountability gap of the Minister not coming to the Assembly on these issues. We do have the Minister coming to committee, so I'm going to propose that we note at this stage, but I think the issue of SEN placements is one that I would suggest members will want to pick up with the Minister at when he attends, if we're agreed. Agreed. Item 10.23, we have a reply from our committee member Danny Baker on the Education Holiday Meal Payments Bill raised scrutiny points. So I propose we add to the bill folder, but I just flagged this one as I think the issue of engagement with Department for Communities was highlighted, and we are keen not for there to be heel dragging, I think, on any legislation we're dealing with at departmental level. So I would suggest maybe a chase of the Department for Communities to try and get that information in, as it's pretty critical to our considerations of the bill, if we're agreed. Agreed. Other than that, are members content to dispose of the correspondence?
Just before you go on, there's a letter there from myself. It's actually from Corleone Gael Sculliata. Okay. They were unhappy with some of the evidence that was given by Reyes at the committee, and they just wanted to correct the record on that.
Okay. So that's noted and can be reflected in the minutes then. Okay, and also we have our for both those items 10.23 and 24 are we content to put these scrutiny points to the department as well as we have done to the bill sponsors, if we're agreed. Agreed. Okay. Other than that, are we content to dispose of the correspondence as per the summary note at page 88? Right. Item 11, forward work programme. There's a draft forward work programme for members at page 311 of your packs. So I'm going to hand over to the clerk to speak to that. I think probably just to focus in on the legislation specific issues where there is maybe a little bit of time pressure, and then we can get endorsement of that programme.
There is a little bit of time pressure. Well, I've tried to reflect in the forward work plan how we can get to the end of these processes before summer, all being well. The the Royal College for Speech and Language Therapy may be able to come in just quickly to elaborate on their written response on SEN regs next week. But we've got witnesses on Irish medium education and holiday meal payments that day, and also the convention rights memos have been prepared for both of those, so members will get a chance to have a bit of a deliberation after that. And then the following week, again, a couple of witness sessions, and we're looking to begin consideration really there and see, you know, informally what aspects of clause by clause might be needing further elucidation. So Minister, then on the 10th, we haven't scheduled anything else for that day. The concurrent meeting the Chair referred to will be on the, it's not on Wednesday actually, it's on the Monday. It's on the Monday morning. It's the same day as that allergy thing.
Oh, right, okay.
Benedict Blythe, isn't it?
I think that the concurrent is on. I think the concurrent is the same day as
the
committee.
concurrent
That is my understanding. Yeah, it's the same day.
No,
yeah.
Benedict Blythe is a wee bit further on.
Yes,
Beg your pardon. So,
what day is that concurrent meeting?
It's the same day as committee, 17th of June.
Yeah, in the Senate, and then again a bit more legislative evidence, and the survey results will arrive in for both PMBs at that point, and you hopefully could get to a clause by clause discussion at that point. The department is coming with legal advice actually on the 3rd of June on one of the bills, but not both. So the holiday meals payment, they'll advise on the 3rd of June, and then they hope to advise as soon as possible, but before recess, maybe only in writing, on the workforce plan.
Even sorry, so they're only going to provide legal advice. There's no coming in saying
not legal advice,
amendments.
just issues that they have been asked about that are from a legal perspective. So they wanted to consult their own DSO and so Departmental Solicitor's Office and drafters about some of the issues that they mentioned in their initial briefing.
Yes,
and they're coming back to talk about that. So whatever they tell us, they tell us. Like, they won't give you actual legal advice, obviously.
Yeah, but would they be proposing maybe possible amendments that they would like to see to
well,
work
they have
with the
been
committee?
asked for that. So, yeah.
So I have a slight concern at this stage on that. And it feels to me the sequencing is wrong there. That the department's coming on the holiday meal payments bill with an as yet to be determined date on the workforce plan bill. Given the differing lengths of those committee stages, it feels to me it should be the other way around. So I have asked the clerk to press the department on when they can come on the workforce plan bill, because realistically, we really, anything beyond the 24th of June is going to put, I would imagine, the clerk and her team under undue pressure to deliver the committee report. And it would, and as we've all said, we would be open to do so, and that's why we built in the stage to the end of August. But I think I would rather not have to ask the clerk and her team to be working over the summer on a report, and if that's delayed because the department are essentially coming to give evidence in the wrong order in these bills, given the length of committee stages, I think that would be incredibly frustrating. So I hope we can get through that.
So my team has been in touch with you all about additional committee meetings, and so we have ascertained like rooms and dates that you could have additional committee meetings should they be necessary, but that's obviously subject to members' availability and all the other pressures that you have coming up to recess. So it's there, there isn't yet an agreement to do that, I guess we are trying to avoid that.
Yes. Well, I think maybe if we're agreed to endorse the forward work programme, but maybe with a sort of clear stock take next week, particularly on the two PMBs, because that's where we have a clock ticking, if members are agreed.
Can we actually ask them when they do come forward? What I'm a wee bit worried about, they come in and say, right, that's what the legal advice is saying. They give an opinion the last time about really the legal side of it, and then they go, right, we might see you at the back end of September then or the start of September to maybe talk about amendments and not really work with the committee. I really do want them to work with us. It is a small bill, so I would like that from them. So if we could reinforce that to say come and be constructive with us.
I'm certainly content with correspondence to go on that basis. The committee's keen to work on both the PMBs. Yeah, so just to be really clear on that. Okay. No, that's great. Okay, well, I think take stock on that next week as we don't want to push this unnecessarily in terms of the timescales. Okay, that moves us on to item 12. Any other
before
business?
Before you move on, the committee bill, where is it at the minute?
So we've got a response just to come in on, and that will help us finish the EFM. So I would hope to be bringing the EFM next week, and once the committee has, if you're satisfied with that, then it can go to the Speaker for legislative competence checks, which are usual for every piece of legislation. And if you like, you can advise the department as well of the bill in the EFM at that point.
I'm concerned about the bill going into the Speaker's office, because we were told by the Bill's office when my private member's bill was submitted that it was usually 2 weeks. It actually took 4 weeks. It meant the bill was delayed. It couldn't go to first stage before Easter, so it effectively meant there was a 6-week delay. And I'm saying this now on the record. This Speaker is acting in a very unprofessional manner. We saw that with amendments to the uniforms bill that were rejected. We saw it more recently. You can wait till I'm finished. You can wait till I'm finished.
So the Speaker will ultimately rule on that. It's not.
Wait till I'm finished. It's in the committee. It's nothing to do with the Speaker. And we saw it yesterday with the mother and babies legislation in regard to the start date for that. So, I mean, I would prefer if this could get to the Speaker as quickly as possible, and whoever's responsible for drawing up the FM, that it's done ASAP, and everything go to the Speaker. Because I'm concerned. I was speaking to someone from the Bill's office who was saying that if bills aren't at that first stage before the recess, that's the cut-off date. They're not gonna get.
That's for private members' bills, but certainly, yeah, we can.
Right.
Yeah, we can not wait for the department's reply, and just I'll send you all an EFM.
Well, like I say, so I'm of the same opinion that the EFM should be, if it's with us next week, let's get this signed off and move through the processes as quickly as we can. To David's point around any references to Speaker's rulings, it's not for me to censor a member of what they want to say in committee, and it's entirely a matter for the Speaker, in my view, if that is something that needs to be addressed. Okay. That then takes us to any other business. Is there any other business? Item 12. No. Item 13. Date, time and place of next meeting. It is scheduled for Wednesday the 27th of May, 2 p.m. in room 29 at Parliament Buildings and online. And that just leaves me to put the question that the committee meeting does now adjourn. Are we agreed?
Great.